for staff to provide guidance to elected members. It is not a forum for debate or decisions. It is also not a forum for the public to provide input into decisions or bring other matters to attention of the council. If a member of the public does want to provide input, please talk to staff and they can help you have your say. We've got apologies from Councillor McDonald, Councillor Barber, Councillor Scandrett, Councillor Cotter, and Councillors Harrison, Hunt and Donovan are joining us on Zoom. So welcome Jacob, Mark, Jack, Janine and Dave to talk to us all about coal tar. All we've wanted to know, but too scared to ask.
You're certainly on to start with. Janine's not here today. She's feeling unwell. So Mark's going to step in and do the whole thing.
Yeah, fine.
I'm certainly the front end of it.
I'll do my best, anyway. Thank you. Let's see if... Yeah, okay. Good morning, everyone. My name's Mark Tipper. I'm Council's Senior Environmental Advisor. About 6 years ago, I wrote a coal tar guideline for Council on how to manage coal tar in Council roads, which was peer reviewed and then adopted by a number of contractors and some councils elsewhere around the country. That's subsequently been superseded by a global consent that Council has granted to ourselves, I suppose, which I'll touch on later, and also a national coal tar guideline, which was published in December last year by Waste Mins, and I contributed towards that. So today, though, I'm going to be just explaining what coal tar is, where it comes from, and I'm going to fill in for Janine as best as I can and explain to you what the regulatory framework is around managing coal tar in roads. Is it that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So before I get into the background of coal tar, I'd just like to show you some photos or pictures of what we're talking about. Now I've got this wee pointer here, which is going to work for most of us, but perhaps not the folk at the front there. Apologies for that.
That's right. You're pointing at the white stuff, I assume.
Well, this pointer's not reaching that far anyway. So if you look at the photo on the left there, there's a just below the surface there's a thick white layer, that's been spray painted with a white paint, and that's indicative of coal tar, and above that is a very thin layer of asphalt. So what we often find with coal tar is that it's bound to larger aggregate material than we normally find in modern roads. Modern asphalt is made a combination of tar and very small gravel particles, and coal tar was laid down up to the 1980s on much larger cobble-like material. So it's quite easy to see, and it also smells like mothballs. It's got a very strong, very distinctive smell. So back to what coal tar is, where it comes from. So coal tar is one of the byproducts of the coal gasification process. So many years ago, coal was mined on the west coast, transported around the country to gasification plants, where it was broken down into a number of other products that we use, fertilizers and things, and obviously synthetic natural gas as a fuel. And there are a number of byproducts, mercury and contaminated wastewater, slag, but coal tar was one of the byproducts. And at the time, coal tar was sold and used widely as a roading material. If you're back before asphalt was invented, we're talking back in the 1800s here. The roads were unsealed gravel, mud, dirt, and they got wet and muddy, and nobody liked using them. So when coal tar was available and used as a roading layer, it was revolutionary. It's waterproof, it's hard wearing, provided a brilliant roading surface. So it was widely used, not just in New Zealand, but all over the world, and is still actually exported around the world. I know some of the Pacific Islands import coal tar still from the States to use on their roads. So it's a very useful material. Unfortunately, it's not very healthy. It contains a lot of PAHs, which is the short term for polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And yeah, I'll touch on those a little bit later as well in Janine's section, but basically they're not very good for you. The key defining feature of the strength of any given coal tar is its BAP content. So BAP means benzoapyrene, which is one of the which is a type of PAH. So I'll just skip on to the next page here. Not with this. So here's a list of all the well, a lot of the PAHs that are found in coal tar. You don't need to read them all. The nuts and bolts of it is there's a big long list of PAHs. So on the left is some of the constituent PAHs that are found in coal tar. The table on the right is representative of the most harmful fractions of PAH. So when we find coal tar in a road and we need to excavate it and dispose of it, at this stage in this country, the only way to dispose of coal tar at the moment is to put it into a landfill. And to determine which landfill we're able to send it to, we need to know how toxic it is. And as I say, the measure of that is its content of benzoapyrene, BAP. The figure there gives a calculation factor of the other most toxicant contents of coal tar, and they are added together to give a total which is called BAP, PEF, or TEF, which if you look at the table on the left-hand side there, about halfway down, you can see there's a PEF and a TEF in brackets. So those numbers there are the numbers that we look at when we're trying to assess how toxic, how harmful coal tar is, and then how we need to manage it and where we need to dispose of it. I should say the numbers in that table are quite low. This is almost clean fill. Benzoapyrene in coal tar can get up into the hundreds of parts per million, which is, yeah, can only go to Cape Valley. It's a very toxic material. So that's very briefly what coal tar is, where it comes from, and why we've got it in our roads. It's historic. It was used for about 100 years and was slowly replaced by clean asphalt as that was invented and imported from the States. It's all over Christchurch roads, pre-1980 roads, that is, and the same applies all over the country.
And just let me throw by Bob's for all the young'uns here. We used to have the gas company down by Old Lancaster Park, and that's where the stuff used to get made.
Xavier College, Phil.
Hmm?
Yeah, Xavier College.
That's right. This
right.
Hadn't affected you much, has it? But that's where it was. And the byproduct, as you say, there was two things: coke, which was great, you could burn it on your fire, it was brilliant, and then coal tar as well. So it's bad stuff.
Yeah. Thank you, Phil. And there was 54. There's across New Zealand at their height, there was 54 gasification plants all across New Zealand. So I should say this isn't just a Christchurch problem. This is all the major cities across New Zealand have to deal with coal tar. Hence the national guideline produced by Waste Mins just recently. So I want to skip into. Was there any questions on any of that before?
No, sorry, that I shouldn't have done that. We'll just wait a little bit longer till the end. From the to when you get to when you're finished talking, you'll be happy to do questions. Otherwise, we'll be here all day because I'll start and I'll never stop.
Roger that. Okay, thank you. So these slides are around the regulatory framework within which we need to manage coal tar. So what have we got? So yeah, coal tar, actually, that's an interesting point. Coal tar is a very strong compound, polyaromatic, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon, refers to hydrocarbons are made up of carbon and hydrogen atoms. And in a polycyclic ring is multiple, multiple rings of hexagonal carbon framework surrounded by hydrogen atoms, and it's very, very strong. It's very persistent. It doesn't break down very easily. and that's what makes it, I guess, such a contaminant of concern, is that it's very persistent. PAHs have been identified as being carcinogenic, mutagenic, genotoxic, and a reproductive toxicant, which basically means you give you cancer. It can change your body at a genetic level, and it can affect people and organisms' ability to reproduce. Key point on this slide is that coal tar is referred to as a non-threshold contaminant. So there's no safe level of contamination. Any amount of contamination can cause problems in organisms. From a human perspective, but I guess out in the natural world as well, PAHs, coal tar, can be ingested orally, inhaled, and through dermal contact. The inhalation is of a particular concern because when we're disturbing coal tar in roads, digging it up or cutting it or milling it, we can release we can release dust, which needs to be managed, or people can breathe it in, but also heating it up through a milling machine or saws can also release fumes as well. So we need to be mindful of how we manage coal tar. Forgive me, these slides are new to me, so bear with me a moment. Yeah, so we're looking here at the effects of PAHs in the natural environment. So how coal tar gets into our water system is often through abrasion, whether it's through the processes of construction where we release dust, or even just traffic over roads abrading the road surface itself, and that being that sort of dust and particulate matter being entrained into stormwater and directed to our rivers and streams around the city. From there, that small particulate matter can be ingested by filter feeders or adhere to plant life, which is then consumed by other organisms. And that then from there, it bioaccumulates up through the food chain and causes the issues that we see in fish and other organisms, such as tumors and cataract. There's a list here: tumors and cataracts and fin erosion. So it's easily absorbed in benthic environments. So this is where we're touching on how it's regulated. So under the Resource Management Act, for contaminated land, that's district councils issue resource consents for managing contaminated land. Christchurch City Council has issued a global consent to ourselves to disturb and dispose of coal tar where and when we find it. Yeah, so we're not allowed to, whilst we've got a global consent which we can use on all of our construction jobs, it doesn't authorize us to dispose of that coal tar anywhere other than a licensed landfill. And that's where the BAP testing comes in to identify the most appropriate disposal facility. The global consent is a risk-based consent, and it covers all sorts of things other than coal tar. There's all sorts of contaminated land across Christchurch. Coal tar is only one of the things that we have to manage. When we do find coal tar, despite the fact that it's got a lot of potential health risks and environmental risks, it's treated under that consent as a low-risk contaminant. And part of the reason for that is that, firstly, the contractors that we work with on a day-to-day basis are very, very familiar with managing coal tar. We discover this on a lot of roading projects. We've put a lot of processes in place on how to manage coal tar, and our contractors do a very good job of doing that. Yeah. Another regulator, of course, though, is Environment Canterbury. So ECAN manage, discharge, or authorize, regulate discharges of contaminants to land and to water, or to ground where it may enter groundwater. And we don't have any, council does not currently hold, I don't think, any consents from ECAN for any other options of managing coal tar other than to dispose of it to an authorised landfill. So at this stage, our options are quite limited. And that's the end of Janine's slide on my part. I apologise, I haven't done the same job Janine would have done, but yeah, the information's there.
Okay, so you've told us how bad it is, how you sometimes come across it. And I see some more photos coming up of where you've found it. It's not necessarily everywhere all over the city. It's just hit and miss, sort of, is it?
Yeah, that's quite accurate. In roads that are pre-1980, it's very, very common. But of course, the offset of that is post-earthquakes. We've done a lot of road replacement work, curb replacement work, and services replacements. So whilst in roads of that age, you can expect to find coal tar, a lot of that material has been removed progressively over the various repair works that council have been undertaking, particularly for the last 15
but so
years.
We don't scare everyone to death thinking that as soon as they're going to walk out on the road, they're going to make some dust off their foot and die from coal tar exposure. Since 1980, there has been different kinds of roading. So if there was coal tar there prior to 1980, it's well covered over with chip seal at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's not a great deal of remaining surface level coal tar in the city.
It's when you stir it up, look at, laying a water main or whatever, or digging up the likes of Innes Road that I see there, which I used to do a lot of, you come across and it does smell like mothballs, as you say. Just one question I've got is, do you, if you come across it, apart from smelling it, can you spray something on it and you can say that's coal tar? Is it like a litmus test sort of thing, or have you got to run away and test it at a testing facility?
No, that's a very good question. Thank you. If I can skip back to my photos here. So where you can see the white paint that's been sprayed on there, you can use an acrylic-based paint to spray on a surface where you suspect coal tar. And if there's no coal tar present, that white paint stays white. But if the paint turns yellow, has a yellow discoloration, that indicates that there's coal tar present there. So it's a very quick test of, and you can see in the photo in the bottom right corner there where there's some yellow patches in the white paint.
Oh yeah.
So it's a very quick litmus test, as you say, of whether the coal tar is present or absent. However, that's purely presence and absence testing. It's not, so you need to do laboratory sampling to determine the strength of the coal tar and then work out where you can dispose of it.
Okay, so I'm just looking at say, and I'm not sure if it is, say that's on Innes Road, and you've dug down and you've found it, you sprayed it with the white paint and there's little dabs of yellow there. Do we then stop, or do we have to send it away to get proper testing to know where to dump it? Is that what you're saying? I'm just looking at how much time a road is open and we're not getting it.
Again, a very good question. Thank you very much. So,
sorry, I'm not.
In an ideal world, before we do works in a road, whether it's for the roading surface itself or 3 waters replacements, etc., we'll go along and do potholing into the road pavement to see what sort of materials we're dealing with.
Hey, Lovey, it's very cold. Can you come here? Daddy's got mine.
Tyler, you got your mic on, bud?
No, sorry, my bad. It's that good.
We know you're all calm.
Oh, that was cute. So if we can identify coal tar in advance and with the samples work out the strength of that coal tar, then before we even get to excavating the road en masse, we can come up with a plan of how much we're dealing with, how to excavate it, where we need to take it, and it's a very efficient process. If the testing isn't done up front and we do discover coal tar, let's say unexpectedly, there is a process where, ultimately we need to wait to get the laboratory results back to determine where we can safely dispose of that material, and that can be up to 2 weeks.
Okay, yeah, because I'm looking at it from a poor guy doing a road, and it stays open and it hoses down on his subgrade and it all gets soft and it turns to crack. With the likes of, say, that right hand one, the bottom right hand one, do we just trim down to, say, that looks like about 50 mil thick? Do we trim down to about 100 mil deep and take that away and then just carry on as if it's gone, or do we? Please tell we don't go mad and say, oh, let's dig it out 300 mil deep and the whole lot goes to Cape Valley. Where do you have to delineate that?
I mean, ultimately, both of those options have been followed for various reasons. From the coal tar did penetrate that deep. In this example, it looks like it's only a thin layer, but you can see on the left of that bottom right photo that where the paint has been sprayed lower down, that's showing yellow as well. So in Innes Road, for example, I don't want to go too far ahead, but I think we took about 400 mils away there because the whole lot was coal tar contaminated. So the better the testing that's done pre-works, the better we're able to identify layers of clean and layers from dirty and excavate them separately, thereby minimizing the amount of material that's taken to landfill, which obviously saves a lot of money in disposal costs. But then you need to balance that with the excavation cost of trying to separate one layer from another. So there's always a trade-off between time and cost. You'll know as well as anyone.
And I certainly understand a lot of the old roads around town. That picture on the left, it looks like it's only got 100 mils of gravel, and then you're into the dirt. So, and that's the way roads were built in those days, and that's why we're running into trouble now with the heavier stuff that's going down them.
Correct.
Okay, so I have got a few questions. I've got Aaron's had his hand up for a while. Then Tim.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of questions just around the standards we're following. Is it a national standard, and who set the national standard? Because coal tar is obviously used in medicine. People rub it on their skin, and that has the same outcomes potentially when you look at the NHS and National Cancer Institute, that it is linked to but doesn't necessarily cause cancers. And that's for occupational use. But so can you just clarify, are we following a national standard, and who set that?
Yeah, I can't talk to the medicinal parts particularly, sorry, but yeah,
That's right.
the Waste Mins has published a national guideline in December last year.
But sorry, who published it?
Waste Mins. It's
Who's that?
National regulator for let's say contaminated material.
So is that
waste
a government?
It's a national, government body, yeah. So
a government body, yeah. And so they did it in December?
It was published in December, yes.
So what does that now mean? Because we have a whole lot of rules around asbestos, for instance, as you'll know about, you deal with it. And New Zealand took we took the strictest approach in the world. Ours is the same as Western Australia. But what are we following with coal tar? What has set this?
So the guideline was prepared by a number of contaminated land, contaminated material experts across the whole country. I myself contributed towards it, and it council's processes accurately reflect the guidance in that document in terms of pre-works sampling, lab testing, field testing, and disposal options. So that's what's explained in the guideline, and very, council's processes typically reflect that very, very accurately.
Yeah, okay, I think I'm asking it wrong. Why have we gone to suddenly dealing with coal tar in the way we do when it's only a potential link to cancers? It's not like asbestos where it's pretty clear cut. You can get asbestosis. You can work with coal tar every day of your life and not get sick. So
that's true. But coal tar is a non-threshold contaminant, which means there's no safe
like alcohol
amount of exposure. I'm sorry.
like alcohol,
Okay.
when you're pregnant, they have no limit.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron.
Okay.
I've got a lot of questions, and because I'm really keen on getting down to the bit where you're going to suggest how we can play with it differently and save ourselves a fortune. Okay, Tim.
Yeah, thank you. It's just I was around when ECAN did the hail sites, and that was an absolute dog, and the way they did it, and the concern that they raised in the community, because it seemed that they just did old photos of market gardens, and then they went around and told everyone that had those properties in those old areas that they had hail sites. And so the angst that was caused in the community was horrendous, and we ended up kind of doing more than ECAN to try and relax people, if you like. And I just don't want us to get into that situation. So how are we going to manage the concern that this will raise with, it's not a financial concern, but we don't want suddenly people to go running around and go, oh my God, we've got coal tar being cut up in the dust, etc. So how are we looking at that? Are we going to start talking about ways to kind of just relax it a wee bit, or just?
Well, as part of your question there, in terms of reassuring our constituents, is that while coal tar is left alone and under the road, it's not causing any effects or any harmful risk to anybody anywhere or the environment.
Yep.
Locked up and left alone, it's been there 100+ years, and locked up and left alone, it's perfectly stable.
Yeah.
So it's not going anywhere. In terms of how we're managing it, is the best we can within the regulations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Melanie, and then Tyrone, and then we'll let you get on the rest of it.
Thank you.
Well, it's interesting actually what Aaron's brought up, because I'm reading a wee bit about it. But well, I was just wondering, I guess the contractors, when they're digging into roads, they'd use safety precautions and things, because it is more dangerous when you're doing roading, isn't it?
Correct.
Compared to, right, yeah, okay. And I was just wondering also with potholes, if we get potholes, then you might be exposing coal tar on roads. Do we worry about that at all? Because it's just below the surface, right? So
in those photos, yes, but that's not always the case. Obviously, road age matters, whether that part of the road has been repaired, replaced, renewed in the past. So the existence of a pothole doesn't automatically create an exposure risk.
no, but do we consider whether it may?
I would have to ask. So I mean, I don't know the answer to that. Is the short answer.
Or roads that are in very, very poor condition. Say, there are some roads in very poor condition. Do we? It's something we maybe should be thinking about if we're exposing people to coal tar.
Yeah, I would like to think the road and maintenance people have an approach to that, but sorry, that's outside of what I can answer.
And then the other question is just, you talked about like pre-testing the road to see if coal tar is there, but then we often get these projects where, it's sort of after the fact, it feels like they come back and then we find out there's a whole lot of coal tar and the price is going to go up. So why does that happen? And I guess we're going to mitigate that.
I'll sort of cover that in the next bit. So if you want,
Okay.
Thank you. And Tyrone, then we'll get on with it.
Thank you. So in somewhere like Littleton, which I imagine is probably like a coal tar-orama in its streets, like, I mean, I don't know, but I'm assuming that it is. And there have been a lot of mains renewals over there. So, digging quite deep on quite hilly streets and a lot of rain and and a harbour there. So I'm just wondering kind of what the risks are in terms of runoff and those kinds of things. Like, is that is there like contaminants running into the harbour kind of from roadworks or just in general anyway?
Yeah, that's a good question. It very much comes down to the erosion sediment controls that the contractors use on site through their works. The advantage with trenching is, firstly, material you take up is when we know that we're dealing with coal tar, it's typically live loaded straight into a truck. So there's no stockpiling on site, and it's a very clean excavation process. If it rains, any contact with material is going to be inside the trench and it will leach straight to ground. So the risk of that material getting into the coastal environment is very low.
Thank you.
So in terms of the erosion sediment controls that our contractors use, like, do we have I mean, to what level are we controlling that or setting standards, or, you know, are they all the same? Are they, well, clear, you're sort of implying that they're not.
Oh, well, no, erosion and sediment controls need to be planned and executed on a case-by-case basis according to the catchment that you're working in. Council has a template environmental management plan for all of our capital projects. And that's prepared by council or the consultants that we use in terms of, you know, when a project is being designed. The EMP explains what the risks are, and then the contractor who's going to do the works has to fill in their parts of the environmental management plan to say how those risks will be managed. One of those sections in all the plans is erosion and sediment control. The global consent that we operate under requires an erosion and sediment control plan, and so do the consents that we rely on from ECAN as well. So those plans are reviewed by council and ECAN if we're using the global consents from ECAN as well, and in most cases myself.
But the answer to the first question was that 9 times out of 10, the stuff's dug off, chucked on the truck, and it's gone. It's gone somewhere. So
Correct.
It's not there.
It's not
so
there.
to speak. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, can I just make a clarifying point on that one? So when it's just sitting in under the road, the runoff, there's no runoff risk.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Coal tar's hydrophobic, so it doesn't dissolve in water.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, we'll carry on, and then you can. I'll certainly let you give you time to answer questions. Carry on, rewardless, please.
Thank you very much.
Right, I'll try and whiz through these bits quickly. So Three Waters have given us some slides here, which quite interesting because they talk about really the cost of testing, which I think is partly in answer to your question. So they take a risk-based assessment to determine which roads need design, investigation, and then they do that during design. So in here, you can see the cost of coal tar disposal is, I mean, it's about the same as the cost of design. It's almost, what is that, 8% of the overall job there is coal tar disposal. So it's an expensive thing to get rid of. The next one I think is really interesting because it covers the cost of the testing in design. And in some of those, it's up to 10% of the design cost is the investigation of coal tar. So it's an expensive thing to do. It's not something you'd want to do everywhere because it will bump up the cost of every single job we do.
It's just digging boreholes in the road as you go along before you start
and then
the job.
sending it off to laboratories and so on and so forth. So yeah. So it's, like I said, the risk-based approach is probably the best, but it means you will always, anything that's risk-based, sometimes you'll get it wrong. And that's the nature of taking that kind of approach, I think.
Okay.
So I'll go into Inners Road. So this is a bit of a warts and all probably feedback. Test pits and specification developed by designer. The sampling was poor. So I think when we talk about the sampling, we do test pits to find out all sorts of things. We quite often we use them to find out where utilities are, and while we're there, we test for coal tar. In this particular example, the people doing the sampling didn't take multiple samples, and because they were taking trenches in places where they were looking for utilities, these were obviously areas where the coal tar had been taken out already and moved away. So we end up with quite an unrepresentative sample, I think, in reality. And based on that, we thought we needed about $250,000 for disposal of coal tar. Once they started working on the water main, they smelt it. We did much wider testing, and it ended up being about 1.3 million for disposal. We were somewhat up against the clock with this because we needed to finish the surfacing in the sealing season.
But what option did you have once you found it? You had no
well, possibly that's the thing. But at that point, we could have come back and discussed it with you. But once you've opened up the road, there isn't really any other option than to just keep going, is there?
So looking at this one, sorry, I'm butting when I shouldn't.
That's right.
Looking at this one, it was 2,500 cubes. That looks like everything that came out of the road went away, because 2,500 cubes is a lot of stuff.
Yeah, probably. I mean, there's significant depth. I mean, trying to think. Not quite all of it. There you go.
Now, do, and I'm going to. This is not going to be good. Do some contractors put a real big high rate on coal tar removal when there's not much there, knowing that there could be a fair bit there, so they make a good coin out of it? Do you keep an eye on that sort of stuff?
We do keep an eye on that kind of stuff. Good. Yeah. So rates are compared against other jobs to check that they're reasonable.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. Carry on.
So in terms of coal tar management options, like you say, there probably wasn't that big an option here. But I mean, the most obvious thing to do is, can you leave it where it is? Can you build the job somewhere else or do something else? And it requires you to not end up disturbing it. I've got wheels to wings at the bottom there. We've done extensive coal tar testing for wheels to wings, and we've found coal tar in a small number of areas, not particularly extensive. And possibly we can look at other designs for separators in that area so that we don't have to disturb the coal tar. So there are options if you can find it early and know where it is. Can it be disposed of on site? So there are occasionally some options to wrap it and rebury it. It's not really an option in a road because obviously they're utility corridors and people are going to have to come back and dig it out again at some point. But they are options in some other places, parks and so on.
You're only digging the road up because it's buggered, so you can't really bury it anywhere.
Well, exactly, yeah. And it's probably only something you can do in relatively small scale as well. Mm-hmm. Off-site disposal, location and cost. I mean, Mark touched on that earlier, but it depends on the concentration. It can go to all sorts of different places, some of which are incredibly expensive, some of which are even more incredibly expensive, to be honest. So we've got Cape Valley. I mean, there's also the environmental element. I mean, Temuka is, 3 hours drive away, probably more. So, I mean, that's a huge, if you're taking large quantities, that's a huge amount of carbon to be pumping into the air.
That's good. Keep going to the OAC bit.
So, yes, so I would say this isn't necessarily the greatest job we've ever done, but we've learned from this. Mark certainly has been quite heavily involved in looking at it, and there are other jobs where we're trying to apply the learnings from Innes Road to be better on other places.
Just going to quickly swap presentations because some of the graphics didn't quite come out on the online version. Just get it going. There we go. So big problem and a massive problem for us in the OARC, as you would have seen from some of the slides. This one here is a wee bit hard to see, but I'm just seeing if I can move my pointer or this. No. But what the slide's showing, all the roads in grey within the red boundary are closed and stopped, and most of them need to come out for various reasons, either because we're putting in stormwater treatment or they're going to end up in the floodplain of the river. And what that means is that if there's contamination in there, then you're going to have contamination there long term with a wetter and wetter environment. So you really don't want to be leaving these roads in place. Because of the age, most of them will contain coal tar, and we've pretty much every time we've gone looking for coal tar in roads of the correct age, we've found them. The yellow roads stay open, although we are looking at also closing some of those. So there's a significant amount of roading material all in one project. This is
sorry. Could that be a place where we could build a mound somewhere and put it all on site somewhere? It's not like digging a road, so that is a place that we could. And I think you've done that down at Pages Road.
Yeah, well, that one we sort of covered a contaminated site. We didn't necessarily set out to build a mound. So yes, sort of. I'll come to that.
Okay,
yeah.
Sorry.
So what we're looking at here, this is the results just graphed of some of our testing. So this is a cross section through one of the roads that we tested. The red is coal tar. The depths of the red go down to about 0.5 metre. And what you can see from this is it's extremely inconsistent. So typically the coal tar got laid down in layers as people constructed the roads. They would sort of have a layer of coal tar sealing material, and they have some base course and maybe some more coal tar. Especially as roads got sort of built up over time, you might find that every so often they used a layer of coal tar. And then what happened in the earthquakes, particularly in the corridor, but also in some other parts of the city, is that the roads slumped and wobbled around. And then to fix them, people came back in and put fresh material. So because they slumped unevenly, now our coal tar is unevenly through a lot of our red zone roads. And that unfortunately means that you can't just scrape off layers and take them away. You've actually got to take that entire soil profile, because otherwise you're testing every 5 meters. You're trying to set up your machine to mill out 20 and then change it and then mill different. It just becomes crazy. So really at a broad scale, we've got to think that we're actually taking away about 0.5 metre of most of these roads as an assumption. So then looking at some of the numbers that gives us, they're quite worrying. So we've got potentially up to about 180,000 cubes of contaminated material just in the corridor. Brooklyn's is similar age, probably about, say 20% of the size. So you can imagine we've got more up there. That ends up with about 330,000 tonnes of material that would have to go to Cape Valley. And based on the rates that we're seeing, that's around $100 million worth of cost.
Sorry, is that just the dump fees or actually getting it up there?
So that's in total cost, so transport and dumping. But that's based on a reasonably good rate. We've had rates that are significantly higher that we've had to then work with a contractor to prune back because they do try and pack them sometimes. I've assumed a big truck like those ones that Cape Valley has in terms of calculating the number of kilometres that would take. Using those big trucks is about 4,700 trips to and from Cape Valley, which is about 750,000 tonnes of emissions, which we don't want to do, obviously.
But one thing, just to five bobs, I love talking about this because it's right up my alley. Take the likes of North Haven Road. I know for a fact that one got all its coal tar carted to Dunedin because it was cheaper to do that than it was to take to Cape Valley. So your greenhouse gas spread of trucks going miles away is even worse.
Yep. So sometimes you can save a little bit of money, but then you have more emissions. So, so it's a bit of a trade-off. And so the perils of the status quo, we're all pretty familiar, but obviously the climate change is getting worse and worse, and we've got to treat it quite seriously. Construction contributes heavily to climate change, and the status quo, if you're looking at it project by project, like say Innes Road, you don't actually have the time to step back and say, is this the way that we should be doing it? You've got to solve your problem. You've got coal tar on the road. You've got to take it to Cape Valley. Results in increasing emissions and also coupled with the rates rises. And those are all articles from the last 3 months, different councils around the country looking at their rates rises. So what we're looking at doing in the corridor instead is bioremediation. So the benefits of that, obviously we can save the costs that I mentioned before and the emissions, not entirely because it's not a free process, but significantly. It's a scalable solution that we can use across the city, which then increases on those savings. It avoids landfilling useful material, so it's actually great material, and it seems a huge shame to dump it into Cape Valley. It also means then that we can avoid having to, say, expand Cape Valley or build new landfills because 185,000 cubes is a lot of material. I don't actually know what the capacity of Cape Valley is. And then it also reduces the cost and the emissions associated with creating new material to then bring in to backfill your roads. It also would give us, if we can get it working, it gives us positive news about our financial responsibility, about our obligations to climate change, and it also improves our image as a hub for innovation. And it's one of the things that is a key objective of the Regen Plan. So we're sort of compelled to do it. Because we've got Objective 7, which is that we're establishing a world-leading living laboratory. So the benefit of the OARC in particular is that we can stand back and say, is the status quo the correct way to be doing things? And we've got the time and the budget to do so. So what we're doing, this is just a little sketch that I did. We've had PDP, who have got a whole lot of environmental scientists working on this. They've done a literature review to look at what the most promising ways that we might be able to treat this material are. Because quite often there's a whole lot of research that goes on in universities. There's the on-site way that you do things, and there's not a great connection between the two. So you get all these interesting studies that never actually get applied in the real world. So we're trying to create that link. So they've identified a solution that they think could work based on a whole lot of science that's been done. Effectively, what it does is you take your contaminated material, You mix it up with microbes and organic material, which is, for instance, the compost that we've got out at the organics processing plant. And the coal tar is, the way I understand it, is that it's attracted to the organic material. So it just naturally, through chemistry, heads to those materials, and they then bind it and eat it and break it down. So, and that takes a period of time. So we're working now with UC to carry out some experiments in their labs. That's well underway. The next phase will be a pilot phase to treat about 5,000 cubes, which we've tagged Bexley as the site for that. And then the final phase, we think, would be to set up an ongoing facility, probably in collaboration with a local quarry or a local asphalt plant, someone that's got a bit of space. We've had some discussions, some initial discussions with some suppliers, and they seem reasonably interested, but it depends on timing. So two really important questions for this. One is, will the water runoff be clean? Because if the water comes out contaminated, it becomes quite a hard thing to manage. And the second is, obviously, does it treat the solids, and how quickly does it treat the solids? So the first answer on the water, we've got pretty good results back on that. So what you're looking at here, the first graph shows the initial contamination levels from 3 different experiments that we've got going, with just basically running the water through and testing it as it comes out. The levels are quite high. The second graph shows the 3 bars, unfortunately, they're the same color, but they're showing different things. So the blue is the water post-treatment, so after we've applied our treatment, shows the water contamination levels. The orange is then after 5 days, and the green is after 28 days. So what it's showing is that initially it comes out quite clean. If you then leave it and continue to flush water through for 5 days, it becomes a little bit hotter. And then if you leave it and continue to flush water through for 28 days, it comes out considerably more hot, which is basically because that water is conveying on some of that organic material, it's washing the PAHs out, and that's then getting accumulated in the water. So what it's suggesting to us is that A, it's starting to clean the material, and B, if you can then get that water out efficiently, then you've got effectively clean water, which is below background levels, which is the third graph. The orange line there shows the background levels. So the really high bar on the left of that third graph is the water coming out without any treatment at all. And then you've got the second bar being 0 days, the third bar being 5 days, and the fourth bar being 28 days as an average of all the PAHs. So that's quite good news. It means that if we can convey our water out, we can get it down to a level that we're happy with. It also makes sense from a practical point of view because we don't actually want to be holding that water because it means we have to build big ponds, and it just makes a whole lot of extra expense. So we actually want to convey it out as quickly as we can. It's still not 0. And so what we're thinking is that to get it much closer to 0, we should be able to run it through activated charcoal filters, which should get that last little bit of contamination out and not be overly expensive to do. So the water's looking quite good, we think. Then the solids. So all of it's pointless if we're not actually removing our contaminants. So what this graph here is showing, this is a graph of our results after 150 days, which is about 5 months worth of testing. The green is the, well, along the bottom are all your different types of PAHs. So as Mark touched on, there are different types, and some of the ones that, you can't see my arrow, unfortunately, but the PEFs and the TEFs, which are the really bad ones, you can sort of see if you squint your eyes off to the sort of left of that screen there. The green is untreated material. So that's the material that we had when we first put it into the experiment. And the blue is the treated material after 150 days, so much lower, looking quite good. And the pink is the background levels. So they're not quite below background, some of them, and in particular the PEFs and the TEFs, which are still slightly above. But obviously we're continuing this experiment, and we would imagine that these levels will continue to reduce. So we feel like we're certainly on the right track with it. However, there are some cautions, and it is still preliminary data, which is my next slide. So what we have to do now is we have to, we've got our scientists just modifying the experiments and making sure that they can verify the results. What they're really looking at there, I might just go back to the previous slide, is that you can sort of see some ghosted lines there. They did 3 experiments. One of them worked really well, 2 of them worked quite badly. So two of them actually spiked the levels. So they think that they can replicate the results and they think they know what went wrong in those other two experiments. But what it does show is that if you don't do your process right, you can actually make the problem worse. So that's the next key phase, is just to make sure that we understand why those ones did that and how we avoid it. So we've re-engaged with ECAN. They were initially very supportive of this project. They were probably as excited as I've ever seen ECAN, which wasn't that excited, but still. So that's to discuss the results
the same sense?
And the next steps. We're setting up a contract with PDP to consent our pilot project at Bexley, along with a soil phytoremediation project, because this is only one of our contamination project problems in the red zone. We've also got contaminated soils. And all going well, we hope to have them both up and running this summer. The cautions, as I said, 2 of the 3 experiments did spike our levels. Not all of our results are under the baseline yet. And we really need to, I guess, get to a point where we know how long it's going to take to get them under the baseline, because that affects how viable it is as an off-site commercial activity. So if we can get a process that gets our base material down below background levels in, say, a year, that probably works for a quarry. But if they have to hold it for 5 years, then that's just way too much for them. So it's sort of that does speak to the commercial side of things a little bit. And the last one is that even though ECAN are supportive generally, they don't really like the idea of us doing an on-site pilot at this stage. So we've still got some work to do to convince them.
Sorry, that last sentence, they don't like you doing it where, sorry?
On-site. So the idea of taking our Bexley roads and moving them to the high dry ground and setting up a controlled pilot, they don't love that as much as they like the idea of taking it completely away somewhere and doing it off-site.
But you could do it on top of the old Bexley landfill, which is full of rubbish anyway. Is that where you were hoping to do it?
No, I was hoping to do it more in the that sort of Wetlands Grove area of Bexley. That was the more new subdivision in the southern part of it.
Oh, that road. It's not very good now. Okay, thank you. No, that's good. That's good. All right, so we've got a couple of questions. Yanni's been waiting patiently. Fire away, mate.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just going back to the earthquake repairs and also the probably the significant shallow trenching that Enable did, we were told that some of that would have been removed as part of those processes. Do we have any documentation around what's being done? Like, I know when in the past when I tried, for example, to ask where the environmental risk assessment was for the shallow trenching decision, I've been unable to get any information as to how the environmental risks to shallow trenching were considered and how they were mitigated. Yeah. So we've now got issues around tree planting and local streets because of the shallow trenching. But do we have evidence around what they did with the coal tar?
My understanding, it gets a little bit outside of my area, but my understanding is that it is a little hit and miss in terms of the records. So what they do when they test for coal tar, or they set up the testing regime, is that they'll try and look through the RAM records and find any information they can have about what trenching's been done, because they try and avoid those areas. Because that's, I think, what happened on Innis, where they checked previously dug surface trenches, which have been dug out, coal tar put somewhere, and then backfilled with new material. Yeah. And they then tested that and found that was all clean, but that wasn't actually indicative.
So I guess maybe it's, I mean, probably not a question for you, probably more like executive team, but it would be really good to get an understanding of how that coal tar risk was managed through the earthquake stuff that was done and the decisions that Enable.
Yeah, but what we've got here is something we don't know what's happened. We do, or we don't know what's happened in the past. This is from here going forward, how we can best look after it, and maybe a new system that we can, a cheaper option that we can look at.
Yeah, I guess for me, like if you go back to the North Avon Road closeout report, we were aware of this issue then. We had the same problem 5 years later with Innis Road. We've just repeated the mistakes of the past. So I do want to get some confidence that we are doing things differently around lessons that we've learned previously. And I don't have that confidence at the moment, given that what we've seen at Innis Road. So,
but it was there anyway.
No, the way in which we're designing roads, around the level of testing, around the assumptions, around who's doing it, none of that stuff has been addressed with Innis. We've been told that that's what happened. But why don't we have systems and procedures in place following what happened in North Avon Road to stop that from happening?
If we're digging, and I won't get into this, if we're digging a road out which is of poor quality, like Innis Road was, and I've seen those photos, you're going to get it anyway if it's there. You could go 200 metres down the road and find there's nothing there, couldn't you? So I think we've got to, if we were identifying the problem, we've got to look forward, not back.
Sorry, I guess the key question for me though is how can we have confidence in our transport budgets and our LTP or in our detailed design or scheme assessments? Some projects are getting put on hold because they're probably following a higher level of assessment. So Wine Street, for example, before we're even giving it to a contractor. Other streets we've given to a contractor to start the work and then ended up having to put in significant additional money, right? Which is not new because this is what happened in North Avon Road. To quote the closeout report, coal tar, unsuitable materials and service clashes, improved quality of investigation data handed over, e.g. ground condition services, quality of information to be checked thoroughly, including site walkover as part of handover from design to construction, and review of investigation, assessment, disposal and reporting of coal tar when present in the pavement. I mean, there's a number of other things, but
Brent will answer your question.
that was 2019, 2024, Innes Road. We still have
We're digging a hole and we're finding it.
So
the same problem.
as part of Jacob's presentation, he commented there about some of the earlier processes and some of it got missed, but I think Lynette wants to make a comment about change to the end-to-end process, potentially.
It wasn't so much what I was going to say, but I was going to say that the councillor's question is about the confidence in the planning of the programs. That is a separate piece of work that's coming up, and we are going to give you a lot more information on that over the next few months in the lead up to talking through all our programs with all of the community boards. So I think that's where we can take that. This one is about, and Jacob did also raise the fact that if we take a risk-based approach, we won't get it right all the time. But we've got it right a lot more, but we can talk through that and how we develop our programs and the allowances that we make in our assessments for budgets. When we talk about the programs, it's probably more.
Thank you, Tim.
So, sorry, just
because your point is, and I'm kind of wondering what the point is. The fact of the matter is our processes are getting better and our knowledge is getting a bit deeper. The costs going up, so that will just go to the fact that we will have less roads to do because this is going to have to happen now that we're aware of it in a better sense. So what we've set out in the long-term plan, the budgets that we've set for our ratepayers is going to stay. So therefore, we will be doing less in the long term because we've got to deal with this as part of the roading budgets.
sorry, the presentation was really good. I really enjoy the case studies. I think it's excellent. What I'm concerned about is that we were aware of this in 2019. We commissioned a review. We identified that there were gaps in processes around the contractors and the design. But then we got to Innes Road, which we've got the same or similar problems. And I'm just trying to understand, because there's been other roads as well, I'm sure.
And there'll be lots of water main trenches and stuff like that as well.
Nothing's just perfect, and we're moving forward with a better process. But the fact of the matter is, as our processes get better and our knowledge gets better, the fact of the matter is our budgets are set, and therefore we will be unable to achieve everything we're hoping to, because the costs are going up.
Totally. So I think one of the key things would be to get some clarity around the key decision points for a project. We put money on the budget. Appreciate that's just a high level estimate. At what point does it come back to us if additional budget is required based on things like the coal tar, right?
But it may not, because we set budgets, so things will get pushed to the next phase or the next budget round, because we're unable to.
All over this.
Yeah, and that will all come out through that programming discussion. We're here today to talk about the coal tar and what we can do about it, and the work that David and his team are doing in the red zone. Well, I can talk about the assumptions that we make when we do our programming, and when we would come back through that programming discussion with each of the boards.
So can I just ask,
we do have to get going.
Just on audit and
one last one.
Do we have an audit and risk thing around this? Like, how is audit and risk managing the financial and the program delay risk around the issue of coal tar?
Well, we don't know until we dig it up, and you can test all the living daylights and have an idea of what it's going to be, but it's it's a hidden thing. You don't know what you don't know.
It's no different in essence to unsuitable materials or utilities in spaces that we don't find them. It's the same as any other financial risk that we have. It's using.
So,
it's
but
about
in my time
project.
since North Avon Road,
Yep.
like there's been a number of projects where the budget has consistently been exceeded based on the discovery of coal tar, right?
Yes.
So
Yep.
I would hope that audit and risk do have some sort of oversight of what's happening around that, given the impact that it's having on our.
Councillor, every project in our system has a risk register attached to it, and coal tar will be one of those risks, and this goes for through waters and transport jobs. As Jacob told you in this presentation, when they tested for it down Innes Road, unfortunately, you're testing for a number of things. You test over the top of perhaps a more recent trench, you may not find the coal tar. So that's why they want to try this different approach. But Lynette has already said that she'll be coming back in the next couple of months.
Okay,
So
thank
can
you.
I- so can-
No, Yanni, we've got to.
I just want to check on Cape Valley. So obviously that's a lot more expensive to dispose of it at Cape Valley than other places.
Yes.
Is any work going on, given the climate impact of transporting it way further, around what we could do at Cape Valley? Like if we have to treat it on site or not allowed to do the pilot in situ, what are the options that we've got around using Cape Valley?
No, Dave was saying about quarries and different things.
Yeah, I think
Looking at options.
Yeah, we're looking at options, so that's cool. Right, enough. Victoria.
I actually want to applaud Yanni and thank him for raising that Innes Road issue, because there is a review done on North Avon Road and we are seeing exactly the same things 5 years later. So
That's
I think
correct.
the
What he's
conversation-
asking is right, but we
Yeah. So I'll be looking forward to that session about how we're going forward. So the two questions I've got at the moment are, given the environmental and financial implications of the issues, can we now expect that every roading project report that comes to this table has a section specifically dealing with this issue in terms of the cost implications and the environmental, so that we are all over this from that risk perspective? Or is that something that is going to be addressed when we have the next updated workshop session?
Roading question.
I'll have to take that one, I think. We should be dealing with any of the risks relating to a project. So risks also include insignificant financial risks, and often bigger than coal tar are the risk of unsuitable materials. Again, we do testing. So each report should cover off what pre-work we've done to try and minimise the risks to the financials of the project. So whether it's on coal tar, unsuitables, utilities, each report should cover that off.
So I think this is a red flag that if it's not in the report, we'll be asking some quite detailed questions about that. So
it's the same for all Three Waters projects as well, because they're digging into the road.
Okay. And then the second issue for me is being on the Papanui Innes Central Community Board and seeing this information about the Innes Road project. This is the first time I've been made aware of this. And do you not think it would be best practice for this sort of information to be coming to the community board as well? I know we've got a community board member sitting here today, and like Ali, we haven't seen this before. Can we make a note, please, that when there are significant issues like that on projects that are big like this with a main arterial route going through the ward, that actually we're informed about it as the situation is arising?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's unreasonable to ask that.
No, thank you very much. I've got 2 questions left, right? And I'm the last one, right? I used to watch them do coal tar. It's like everyone watching it. It's like putting rice bubbles down and pouring condensed milk over the top of it. And the condensed milk runs into the gaps in the rice bubbles, and that's what forms the road. And then they'd throw some more stones on it and they'd put some more coal tar on it. And that's how they built the road up. That lots and lots of footpaths in the east were built like that years and years ago. Just the last question. The City to Sea Surfway that's starting at Pomeroy's and going down to the Midway Bridge, which has just been let, which is cool. I was under the impression that, and it's been built all on Old River Road. When I was talking to one of the guys, someone who was pricing it, and they were concerned that we were actually digging out a perfectly good road and it had coal tar and it was going to be $1.5 million worth of extra cost to dump it. And they came up with the suggestion of, why dig it out and put new gravel back in just to put an asphalt lid on it? Are we doing it where we possibly can, just encapsulating it? It's like having asbestos stipple on your ceiling. You paint it, you're sort of okay. Are we looking at those as much as we can?
Yes, I'm a bit confused about those comments because that is exactly what we're doing. So we are building it up and encapsulating it. There will be a small amount of digging at some of the interfaces just
Mhm.
because of the
The way it
levels.
is, yeah.
So there's some areas where we do have to take it out, but it's like maybe 5% of the entire amount of paving there. It's very small.
Okay.
It's not ideal because we are leaving the roads in what will become the river corridor. But the reason that we've decided to take that approach on this one is because it's the city to sea pathway, so we'll be maintaining the surface, so there isn't a risk of that surface then breaking down and releasing the coal tar.
Yeah.
So typically we can't take that approach, and we do have to think about taking these old decaying roads out, but on that one we are going over the top and leaving it in place.
Okay, thank you very much. That's fantastic. I think everyone would agree it's a fantastic presentation, and I've let it go on a lot longer because it's interesting to us all. So thank you very much for bringing it to our attention. Well done. Right. So I'm miles
Just
behind.
picking up on an action, Phil, just pick up on that action with ECAN, like when we've got our next governance to governance thing, should we be also sort of raising it with ECAN around getting support for what we're doing with at a governance level?
Probably inform them, but
But it's our problem, and we sort of just tell them what we've done to sort. It's up to us to sort our problem.
I can certainly raise it with my counterpart there because we have at a governance, the GM level, we run it's 3 monthly meetings. So
support the staff and
it's a good idea to try and do the on-site trials rather than cart it.
But the key takeaway for that is Victoria brought up, is to just keep the community boards informed as this goes through.
Then it goes
in
back.
their areas.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing with this one is they tested, but of course where they tested
Yeah.
hit
It's not
trenches,
trench.
so it didn't show.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
But also, just before we get into the next one, the likes of down at Hobblestone Drive in the red zone, all that sort of thing. I know those roads when they were built, and they were all just done with gravel. No, there was no coal tar there, so you'll find that there'll be nothing there. It's not because it's a newer road.
If I could hold my way through this.
Right.
Phil, can we just, with the community boards, actually, can we, really, really good information, can we just get it circulated, the video circulated?
Yeah.
Sure, this is
Specifically to
public.
community board members? Yeah.
Okay. What did you want to bring forward?
Oh, I just have to say it's already 10:40.
You will do, because I'm so good and we're running so far behind. Is everyone happy we just carry on with Cranford Street one before we have a break? Okay, right.
As long as you stop asking all the questions.
Me,
What you-
yeah, sorry. Now, what we have got Ellie here, who is from the community board. So I wouldn't mind her coming up to the table and just sort of not taking over the meeting, but just sitting here and having a bit of a yarn. So, welcome, and far away, Jake.
It's me again. Right, I sort of split this presentation into two because I know some of you weren't here when DEMP was done, so I'm going to try and cover it from the very beginning right through, and then jump into Cranford Street so you get a bit of the background. Oh, it just says what I've already said. So originally there was resource consent around the designations in the northern part of the city for the Northern Arterial and the Northern Arterial extension. And part of that was the notice of requirements, which puts specific requirements on council and NZTA to deal with the impact of the Northern Arterial. And that involves a whole load of things like low noise asphalt and fencing down the motorway and dealing with water flows and all sorts of other things. But for us, it mostly deals with the downstream effects of increased traffic to the suburban areas. Our legal obligations are that we have to, well, like it says there, mitigate the traffic effects, appoint an independent expert who's a qualified traffic engineer, engage with specific stakeholders, and it laid out some of those, carry out ongoing traffic monitoring for 10 years, and particularly it specifies a 30% increase in local roads as a trigger, at which point we either need to improve the operation of Cranford and Sherburn Street or install traffic calming measures to mitigate the impact. I'd point out that it says mitigate the impacts. It's specifically doesn't say to reduce the numbers, it says to mitigate the impacts. The independent expert developed the DEMP, the Downstream Effects Management Plan. Like it says there, it leans heavily on traffic modelling. So it tried to predict what it would look like and identify the key points where the traffic would build up and the local roads that would be affected, and then put in place measures to deal with that impact. It's quite an extensive document if any of you have ever read it. And in that, it broke down the DEMP into 3 stages. So like I said there, stage 1 is crucial to be open before the opening of the motorway. Stage 2 was that it had to be implemented in 3 years of opening. And then stage 3 could be undertaken any time between the opening of CNC and the end of the commissioning period, which is 10 years from the opening of the motorway. And it also talked about doing that progressively and iteratively. So we would put in place something, see what happened, put in place something else, see what happened. The engagement decision-making has been in a huge number of stages. So originally we went out and asked for views. That helped the independent traffic expert to develop the draft DEMP. That then went out for consultation, came back. It says their council endorsed the DEMP, which it actually didn't endorse the DEMP. It acknowledged the legal requirements that it put on council and instructed staff to carry out stage 1, which was improving the flow along Cranford Street and changes to a number of intersections and various other bits and bobs, which I think we've done it. We've done all of that, I think, now. That was considered by joint meetings of the 2 community boards, who then made a recommendation to council. There was no recommendation regarding the use of peak hour capacity management from the community board at that time, which we'll come back to, sorry. So prior to CNC opening, like I said, there's a whole load of works there. In terms of dealing with DEMP generally, probably the biggest issue we now have is probably related to the closure of Forfar Street at Warrington Street, which has put a lot of traffic onto Flockton and Francis. So that's something we're dealing with, and we've been dealing with the community board over a long period of time. There's been lots of trials, and there's a report coming to. Has it come to the community board yet, or is it just about to? It's already, yeah, okay. So that's been resolved for us to do work on Flockton and not to Francis due to feedback. And Innes Road, which we've discussed. So DEMP made a contribution to that because it has deteriorated since the opening of the motorway, and it's seen a significant increase in heavy vehicles. The Clearway proposal was part of the DEMP. That wasn't supported by key stakeholders. Like I said, the community board resolved not to install peak hour capacity, or recommended to council not to install peak hour capacity management. Council didn't endorse this and approved a 3-month trial of bus lanes back in November 2020. That's been extended over and over and over again, and is now in place until March 2025. I would say that design matters associated with the bus lane were specifically delegated to the board, but the council obviously holds the delegation for special vehicle lanes. So anything that the community board recommends will come back to council if it's a special vehicle lane, which is bus lane, which bus lanes, Clearway and T2 all are.
They're all our decision. They're all our decision.
They go to community board, but then they come to council as a part A.
Because we do get a number of things here that I'm not happy with, just different things. And I go, oh, I can't do anything about it because we've given delegation to the community board. So is this one of them?
No, yeah, ultimately the special vehicle lanes have to be approved by council.
Thank you. No, good. Sorry.
But the stuff related to that isn't. So, like I said, it's a very sort of quick background to CNC and DEMP, and I'm very happy to stop and take questions on that if you've got any, or I'll move straight on into Cranford Street.
Oh, sorry, like to go. Sorry, I've missed it.
Up to you. I was going to say I can either stop or I can carry straight on into Cranford Street and what we're actually coming to talk to you about.
Okay, no, far away. You do the question on that. Do the next bit, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So we have investigated a number of options, and what we're looking to consult on is peak hour bus lanes, peak hour clearway, peak hour T2 lanes, and what we're not consulting on is the T2 extension all the way from the motorway down, or an urban arterial, which is effectively what it looks like now, but with parking where the bus lanes are. The options there, so that's an example of what the bus lane would look like. It is basically what it looks like now. There are some minor tweaks to where it starts, but it's fundamentally what's there now. The clearway would be for all traffic at peak time, and it would revert to parking at outside of peak hours.
So the same peak hours, the peak hours for buses at the moment will be the same hours for clearway.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at. Yeah, yeah. So sorry. Advantages of that, it would improve traffic flow, traffic time saving for all traffic, and we'll come back to that at the end because there's a little table in here later on. Disadvantage of this is that buses would obviously stop at stops in the general traffic lane. On-road cyclists would share the lane with traffic during peak hours. It's considered the least safe option, and we believe it may attract more traffic and single occupancy vehicle types. In terms of buses stopping in the lane, the express buses from Rangiora and Waimakariri don't stop here. So it's just the 27? 27, yeah. And the T2 lane is for vehicles with 2 or more people in them, and they can use that. Advantage is that it has travel time saving for all traffic and encourages ride sharing, which should reduce overall traffic. Disadvantage, again, you've got the inline bus stops. Again, cyclists share the lane. It requires special enforcement techniques, which is, we believe, is a solvable problem, but it's not something that's been done in Christchurch before, and it may take some time to get that in place. And the other issue is that on the motorway at the moment, the T2 lane is on the right-hand side, and the T2 lane would need to be on the left-hand side here. So if you can imagine, if you drove down the motorway, whether you're on the left or the right, at some point you'd have to switch over.
Is T2 being enforced on the motorway at the moment? I don't know. No, don't.
We were asked by the community board to get an assessment on the safety of that, which we have done. And I think the general feedback is they don't believe it's a massive problem. So in terms of that lane shifting, sorry, there's a slide on there. Yeah, it's basically what I just said. It's that bit that everybody has to shift across. So whether you're in the right, if you're in the right, you have to move to the left. If you're in the left, you have to move to the right, and everybody's moving against each other. The T2 extension is that we join up the 2 bits of T2. We initially thought this was probably quite a good idea. We did some modelling. The issue is around the roundabout. You get traffic that comes down from the northern part of Cranford Street that joins the traffic. It creates quite a lot of congestion. The modelling shows which would then push people to go down QE2 Drive and come through the suburbs, which goes entirely at odds to the whole point of the notice of requirement and the DEMP. So that's not being consulted on because it doesn't meet the requirements of the notice of requirement. Additional potential changes that we are also consulting on at the same time is for some increased off-peak on-street parking spaces, safety improvement at the Cranford-Westminster intersection. That was in the press, 6 months ago, probably. There was quite a bit of stuff on that, and English Park signalised crossing. So a few safety improvements there, which is mostly high friction surfaces. We've had discussions with the governance of the board, so Mark Stevens and Emma Pavey. They're keen to end up with something that isn't inconsistent. So they're keen to resolve Cranford Street first and then come back and do these afterwards, so that whatever decision you end up with on Cranford Street, the decisions on this fit with it. So it will be done in 2 stages effectively. We looked at other things, safety improvements around that area, which are not being taken to consultation, around raised platforms, and red light cameras have enforcement issues, and barn stances that create congestion issues and so on. Traffic modelling is really where this probably comes down to, and it's those top 3 on each of those that is the 3 that we're going out for consultation on. So you can see that the time for buses is roughly the same for each of them. High occupancy vehicles in a bus lane are significantly slower, and same for single occupancy vehicles. Bus usage of the corridor, we got asked about this before, and that lays out how many buses there are of each route coming down that corridor at the peak time. So that's at the moment what they're managing. However, ECAN are looking to increase services. So on 91 and 92, currently scheduled for year 3, so in about 2 years' time.
But in that one in morning peak, it's only 27 that would stop.
It is only 27 that would stop, but also the point is they're running down, the people are using it because it's a fast route into town, aren't they? So the speed for the 91 and 92 is still important, even if it doesn't stop there. But yes, agreed. They're the only ones that will stop there. Bus patronage numbers for the 91 and 92 have increased quite significantly since it was started. We sort of discussed this before when we came back to do the bus lane, extend the bus lane trial. But they're the numbers. Yes, they were sent to us from ECAN, yeah. Yeah.
Cool. In terms of the consultation, so we are planning to start very soon from the 29th of July to the 26th of August. So the tactics for this consultation have been designed to target the local community, schools and community groups, affected properties and businesses, previous emitters, bus users and emergency services. We're planning to we got some feedback around the technicality of the information. It is quite a beast of a project. So we are planning on hosting an online webinar to target wider audiences. And that also provides a recorded video to make the technical information accessible for everyone. We have a very wide spanning online marketing campaign that will target anyone living in the local area, but also all commuters who drive through Cranford Street. And we're also working with the Waimakariri Council and Environment Canterbury to make sure that our messaging reaches North Cantabrians. In terms of what to expect, what questions we will be asking, so submitters can give feedback on each option, and they'll also be ranking the options from their most preferred to the least preferred. This structure has been shared during the information session with the Waipapa Community Board, who supported this approach. We'll also be offering a quick poll option for those who are time poor or prefer not to share personal information. And we've found that this has been highly effective on our recent consultations, such as Marine Parade, long-term plan, and the results are consistent with formal submissions. In reporting as well, we'll also be splitting results to help you understand who we're hearing from, e.g. submitter location and modes of travel.
Not back to me. Okay. So yeah, post consultation, we're looking to come back to the community board, and then, like I said, the decision-making process is community board make a recommendation to council. So council will ultimately have to approve any special vehicle lanes.
Okay. All done?
I'm all done. Yeah.
Oh, good. Hang on. No, that's good. So just to be clear, you're going out with the 3 options.
Yeah.
And the way you've just explained it, like you did with Marine Parade, it's actually very simple. Okay, that's good. Right, so we've got Victoria.
Can I just take you back to the peak hour clearway? And you've said the express bus doesn't stop, so only the number 27 is going through, and there's 6 buses during the peak times. How many bus stops are there actually on the stretch of road that you're consulting on?
There are 3 buses bus stops on either side of this section.
And will that information be included in the consultation material?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yanni, Tim.
Yeah, cool.
No.
I was just wondering, like, there's been a lot of infill housing in this area, and I think we bought some land for the road widening, or Innis. I think it's Innis. Is it Innis and Cranford where we bought the kids' bakery? We bought the land on the corner.
I think part of that.
Yeah,
RMA was.
If you look at like what we've allowed to go back, it's not very good for pedestrian. It's right up against the corner, which is a really narrow corner for walking, cycling. I'm just wondering, like, where are the other things that we're looking at in terms of like cycling, walking, crossing around this corridor? Because it seems at the moment there's a disconnect between the development that's occurring and what we're trying to achieve in terms of getting a better environment for people to actually move through.
Yeah, Cranford Street is not a cycle. I would say it's not for cyclists. We got a Papanui parallel major cycleway nearby.
Yeah.
So it's not designed for cyclists, unfortunately.
I mean, I understand that, but there are green cycle markings on the road.
Yeah.
And there is cycle lanes further up that are quite dangerous.
Yeah.
And there is a huge amount of blind corners where heavy vehicles or even local vehicles are running through the streets turning into Cranford Street. And plus we've got a massive spike in infill housing. Is there any strategy to acquire more property to get better outcomes, or to, like, for example, why would you allow this to be built on the corner when it actually blocks the view, makes it more dangerous?
No, there's no plans. This is about meeting our requirements under our obligations under the notice of requirement, which is to keep traffic out of the suburban streets.
Right. So
good answer.
I think that's the point. Sorry, I meant to say this at the top. Lots of our jobs are very different because they're driven by strategy or condition or something else. This is very much a legal obligation on council to do something. And this is us trying to find the best way to meet that.
Sure, but I guess if we don't know what the bigger picture plan is, how can people give meaningful submissions to what option they want if we don't know what the kind of overall outcomes are that we're trying to achieve?
Karen?
No, I mean, I said this job is just about trying to meet our obligations under the
those three options.
Yeah.
That's what we're putting there.
Yeah. I mean, there may be other things that we need to do to deal with the area, but that is not part of this job. This job is just purely trying to deal with our legal obligations.
Around the clearway, the T2 or the bus lane.
It's about trying to stop traffic in the suburban area around Cranford Street.
Okay.
Right.
So if I go back to what right at the very beginning, they are our legal obligations under the notice of requirement. And that's what we have to meet in order to not fall foul of our legal obligations.
Excellent. Good answer. Right. Timothy.
Thank you. Just three quick ones. The first, with regards to the clearways, the T2s and the bus lanes, etc., the Colombo Street south of Morehouse Ave, South City, kind of, or Colombo, whatever, works really well, it seems to. We've got a clearway in the morning and in the evening. And also Lincoln Road, we've got it through the township, and I'm presuming it's going to be through carried through to NZTA's roads at Hallsville. Could we get some stats on the improvement of times with the buses?
On Lincoln Road?
In Colombo Street, because the whole reason they were put in, because the argument was that people weren't using the buses because you needed to get to work on time, and the traffic congestion was holding the buses up. So we took parking out in the morning, which is the more important one where people have to get to work on time, both in Lincoln and Colombo Street. And we've got clearways in the evening as well. So
yeah, I think Lincoln Road we can get you data for. I think Colombo Street is slightly different in the way it's enforced. So it's probably not that comparable.
But it was also what was built into the modelling that was done. So we've been able to get data on this one because it's been running.
Yeah,
so that's part of that time-saving modelling that he had up in the table there.
Yeah, no, I'm totally for both of the Lincoln and Colombo work really well. Just be good to know the improvements. So, when we're talking to people, we can actually verbalise that. The second one is on slide 15. And we sometimes get, and it's not just us, but you kind of get documents from people that have written things up and they're overly complicated. I've just been to court this morning and yesterday morning, and if you want antiquated complications, you want to sit there, it's ridiculous, but we won't go there. But where we sit here in the last one, concerns may cause driver confusion and potential violations and potential collisions. Whatever we do, it has to be as simple and clear as possible, because sometimes we get in the ether and we just keep focused on what the mechanics, but the stupidity of drivers cannot be overestimated. Okay, so whatever we do, it's got to be as simple as possible. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, Melanie.
So in terms of mitigating traffic effects, like what are those? I guess, because is there somewhere listed like what exactly does that mean when it says that for that first point?
Mitigate the traffic effects?
Yeah.
That can mean lots of different things in different places. So in some places it can mean that we do need to get the traffic numbers down. In other places it might mean that you need to get speeds down. On Flockton Street particularly, we've had vibration and speed issues. So there, what the community board has resolved is to put in what are they called, speed hubs effectively, and to rebuild the road and that reduces the speed and it reduces the vibration issue. So it's difficult to say. Like I said, it's not necessarily, the point is it's not about getting numbers back down to where they were or even getting them below that 30% threshold. It's about dealing with the adverse impacts of that.
Okay. I was wondering, does any emissions modelling come into this? Is this part of what we're going to be considering?
There's nothing in there about that at the moment. And like I said, the notice of requirement talks about traffic numbers in the suburban area.
Because I would have expected with our climate change goals that would be part of any project that we do.
We are monitoring the emission from 2020, 2021 from the opening of CNC. We'll keep on monitoring that and reporting back to the board. Yeah, regularly.
But when the decision around this after consultation comes through, will that be one of the key pieces of information? Okay.
That needs to be part of your decision making profile. Each of those different options is a different emissions profile. And that came through really clearly in the first time we got feedback from the community as well. So and it's in the standard report setup. Yeah.
And then with that as well. Okay. Was it? Is it in the consultation?
Is it in the consultation?
It's not included in the consultation for now. No.
But it can be something that we can include if we get like tables. We've been very prescriptive around focusing on, like Jacob has mentioned, the notice of requirement is first and foremost. So we've tried to keep things simple and tried to, again, coming back to the point that it's a very large project with a lot of moving parts. Information like that is on one hand very valuable, but can lose people as well. But we can most definitely look at including emissions, like general emissions, and that sort of recording in the consultation for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And then with the three potential options, do you think the choice of those in the end will have any alteration to use of buses coming from out of town? Because it doesn't look like the time for a bus to travel particularly change. I guess what I'm asking is, will it change bus usage? And then also related to that, like, are we going to advertise this consultation to people in Waimak who might come into town, and I know that they're entering our area, but they're our ones that would be using the buses, for instance?
So in terms of like reaching those groups, so we're wanting to target like bus users, specifically the express bus users, to be able to make sure that they're well aware of the consultation. As it was stated before, with the marketing campaign that we're running anyway, anyone who takes the bus in and out along Cranford Street will have it come up on all of their social media. But we've taken specific measures to make sure that this information does get out to North Cantabrians and that they are very aware of what's going on and how it affects them, what the implications of their submission will be.
Okay, good. Aaron, you got your hand up, mate.
Yeah, I do. So I've got 3 quick questions. First up is, when you're advertising the consultation, will it be advertised on Cranford Street for all users, given the majority, I think, are in vehicles?
To clarify, do you mean that messaging will be around all users, or do you mean?
Yeah, we just said you're targeting bus users, but are you targeting the majority who are the vehicle users?
Yeah, so again, as stated before, so anyone who drives buses, cycles, walks down Cranford Street, there's a geolocated, that will be targeted.
Great.
Then the other one is on the first slide. I think it was the first, or 1.2 or something, right at the top. It says appoint an independent expert. Why would we do that?
Oh, that's required by the notice of requirement.
Yeah, but last time we did that, we just ignored them, because the Shane Turner report, the council tossed out and did their own thing.
It's still an obligation for us to meet under the notice of requirement.
So
whether you decide to take up his opinion or not is your decision, but that is an obligation that we have to meet under the notice of requirement.
Oh yeah, no, he wrote a really good report. We just ignored it. Then the other one is the and I didn't agree with all aspects of it, but the majority of the report was good. And then the other one is, it said something about no speed platforms along there, or they're not being looked at. But did I hear recently the community board signed off putting one on Cranford Street anyway?
Yes, there is one going in on Cranford Street by McFadden's.
So that's going ahead, is it?
Yeah.
So how does okay, so now we seem to be contradicting ourselves, that we can't put them in elsewhere, but we can put them in there.
Sorry.
I think that's probably one for me.
Lynette's got an answer. She's itching to talk to you.
It's a separate issue, and as with all designs, we look at the site-specific requirements of what we're doing. That was a separate safety issue relating to the crossing and the siting of the crossing in relation to McFadden's Road. So it's a completely separate issue that was dealt with through the community board. What we have done in this case is rule out the use on the remainder for other reasons.
Okay, thank you, Aaron.
And then, but if this is a special vehicle corridor, how come that decision doesn't come to council?
It's not a special vehicle. Yeah, special vehicle lanes are council delegation.
Special vehicle lanes come to council.
Right. Not platforms.
Platforms at community board.
Thank you, Aaron. Right. Okay, Victoria, then Ali, then Sarah.
Thank you. Can I go back to the traffic modelling data contained in the table at 4.1 of your presentation?
Yeah.
Can I just check, is that pure modelling, or is that based on the data that has been collected since 2020 on the trial?
Pure modelling.
Pure modelling.
Pure modelling, yeah.
So given that there has been a trial, there's been a number of trials over the few years.
Oh, it's not on Cranford Street. It's on 1/6 Avenue and Flockton Street.
So I'm talking about the trial.
Bus lane trial.
The bus lanes
That's
on
right.
Cranford Street. Have we been collecting any data about that during these trial periods, and where can we see that?
We asked the data from ECAN, however, they changed their system. They couldn't provide recent data. We did have data at the beginning, but with their staff change, with their system change, they could not provide those data.
So have we got any material from, I mean, we've already had a trial period going for 4 years. So where is the material and the feedback and anything coming from that to feed into what we're doing now?
Well, I think the operation of the bus lane would be similar with the modeling results. So the modeling results shows that buses would travel faster than the normal traffic. However, the bus travel time would be similar among the options.
Okay, Ellie?
Just further to that, I'd just like to make clear that in the 2018 Stantec report, it makes very clear that the modelling is one tool, and it's quite possible that driver behaviour could be very different to the modelling. So if we just keep that in mind when we're looking at modelling figures, I think that's important. The notice of requirement, and excuse me, I've just got a bit of a cough thing. The notice of requirement, which is where all of this is coming from, and obviously you start what you say by referencing that as its key. I found it very confusing on the community board to actually pin down the wording on the notice of requirement. I notice in the agenda information for today, it says the consent NOR, which is the NOR, requires the council consider traffic effects and what has to make changes. There's an obligation to make changes. Is that correct?
The obligation is as it says in there. So that it needs to mitigate traffic effects, appoint an independent expert, engage specific stakeholders, carry out ongoing traffic monitoring, and improve, and where it goes over that 30% threshold, to improve the operation of Cranford and Sherburn, or install traffic calming measures.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm wondering is, if the notice requirement does require that, and recently we saw in Flockton that the notice of requirement triggered that with a 30% increase. I think we've had sort of around a 78% increase on Francis.
Yeah.
And there was nothing happening in Francis. And I think your comment, Jacob, was we're not doing anything in Francis due to feedback. What about the NOR?
How the NOR is enacted, the legal advice we've had is that how the NOR is enacted is sort of on the independent traffic expert. They reviewed the proposals for Francis and Flockton and agreed with them. So as far as we are concerned, we've met our obligations under the NOR.
And forgive me, I'm not trying to catch you out here. What I'm just trying to clarify is, you know, I'm hearing different definitions and different actions related to the NOR. Now, I live on Westminster Street. If you put that map up before where you show where this is going to affect, and Westminster Street is right there near Cranford. Yeah. And as you will know, if you live and work and play in this area, you have congestion from basically right up from the turnoff to Papanui, sometimes up to Edgware Road at peak times. Yeah. So that road is a dog's breakfast. So the decision that this council makes is absolutely essential to us who live in that area. It's just, and it's unsafe. My son was hit and nearly went under a ute as he was riding a motorbike down there. So that's why this notice of requirement is so important, to understand what it means, what the legal obligation is, and what it requires you to do. Because I do not want to see things done in this area that are not required but are down to interpretation. I think that has to be made really clear to the people who are making the decisions around the table. One other question I have, with the clearway as opposed to the bus lane, can you just explain to the councillors the main differences to how the road would operate, looking at peak times and non-peak times? So if you were looking at the clearway option versus the bus lane option.
Oh, so if versus a bus lane, if you drove your car down it, you could go in either lane and keep going, and that's the basic point of a clearway. So there is no parking. They are two traffic lanes.
Right, and that means it's all day, every day? It's a 24/7
No,
thing?
it's a peak time clearway. So
Oh, peak
outside
time.
of peak time, that will revert back to parking.
Right. So the bus lanes at the moment are timed, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they're
Okay,
peak
just
time,
one last question. The bus lanes are not, can be used by traffic outside the bus lane times, right?
yeah.
No,
No.
it's parking.
It's park. Well,
Well, sorry,
but if there's no
there are
parking,
not
you can drive
cars
in
there,
it. Yeah.
if there are
Yes.
not cars there. Do you have any plans to communicate that to people? Because at the moment, traffic is backed up in one lane from Innis to Westminster on Cranford with an empty lane, no cars parked, down that bus lane. People don't use it because they think it's a bus lane. Have you ever thought about doing any public information campaigns explaining to people they can actually use them?
I just need to be clear, we need to come back and check that because it is not a traffic lane. Outside of peak hours, it is a parking area.
Yeah.
So we need to be clear on any advice we give you in relation to the road rules around undertaking.
So you can't drive down.
I'm not giving you any advice. I'll come back on that one. We'll have to
Okay.
come back on that.
Okay,
Because
all
it
right.
is not a traffic lane outside of peak hours.
It
It is
reverts
not as a
back to a normal
trafficable
street.
lane.
Okay, no, but what's important there is that you've explained that regardless, it's a one-lane street, Cranford, right? Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah, okay.
Okay, and lastly, Sarah, because I'm so far over time, it's beyond embarrassment.
Just quickly, so the three options that'll be consulted on, each of them, no matter which one was chosen, I mean, they'll have pros and cons, but they would meet the requirements that we have, the legal obligations.
As we stand at the minute, we believe
Yeah.
so.
Okay. And so when it does come down to the consultation and the feedback that people give and the choices that we might make around the table, I do think that Mel's point about having that additional information is really important. So if each of them would meet the obligations, then we're able to choose which of those, I guess, based on other factors, and letting the community have that information, I think it's really important.
Yeah,
So,
sorry, can I just add one thing to that? We have still got 6.5 years left of that monitoring period, and you would expect traffic to grow over that time.
That's right.
So it may well be that we put something in now, and then we find there is widespread breaching of that 30%, and we have to go back and change it. So, but as it stands at the moment, all three of those would allow us to meet our obligation under the notice of requirement.
yeah, and will you just put that in the consultations? I think managing expectations and being clear at the beginning that this is part of an ongoing program. In a few years' time, if things change, we may need to come back. It's just heads up.
Yeah.
Thank you. And how many questions you got, matey?
Can the trial evaluation be attached as part of the consultation so people can read what the impact of the trial has been as well?
Yep. Okay. Thank you, mate. Okay. Now, thank you for yet another very good presentation. I'm looking forward to seeing what the consultation comes up with. So thank you very much. We will now have 15 minutes for a cup of tea. So 20 to 12, please.
Joys of day.
So we haven't seen much of Jacob today. So I know Jacob hasn't got Anne with him. So no, that's all good. Far away, mate. Antigua Street.
Antigua Street, right? Okay. Basically, we have an approved design for this job, and so I don't really want to be making unilateral decisions to go off and redesign the job. I think we're probably overstepping our mark if we do that. So it's coming back. Basically, do you want us to look at redesigning it? And if so, I'll give you a bit of the background and some potential options that you can look at. We were asked by ELT to put up a couple of specimen designs, which we've done, and then we can get into the workshop bit. Current situation, like I said, design is approved. It's fully designed. Tender's ready to go out very soon. It uses a bit of land transferred from Raupaenga, requires relocation of the substation. And the reason why we haven't done it before is because we were going to tie this into the opening of Parakiori, which I understand is now about October next year. So we are pretty much at the point where if we're going to do it, we need to do it. Overall budget is about 3.6 million. The latest estimate we had from the designers, we reckon we're short by about 850k. They're talking about minor tweaks to the design, but even from that, they reckon probably 200 to 300 is the most you get out of it at this stage. The GPS gave us some hope this could attract subsidy, but I think our assumptions on this are quite low. From memory, it's about 400, 450 we'd assume in terms of subsidy for this. So it's relatively low, and I think far from guaranteed. Hearings panel, estimate presented to the hearings panel, 3.7. Did an updated estimate. We've done a couple of updated estimates. So it's about 22% higher than at hearings, which I tried to give you some sense of it there from a chart I pulled from Infometrics. It's broadly in line with national trends. It's a little bit higher, but not anything that would make you think it's wildly unrepresentative. It's sort of the increases are of the area you'd expect, really. So that's the current approved design. Key elements of it, I think, on the, let me orientate myself, northeast side of St Asaph and Antigua, there's a widening there, which is to help cyclists and pedestrians get to Paracury on that diagonal across. And then the separation is made up of mostly rain gardens. There's quite a lot of planting in there, and speed platforms as well. That is almost a copy and paste from Streets and Spaces. I mean, it's so exactly in line with it, really. I mean, it's like I said, yeah, there's not much more to say on that. The wording I put in there is the exact wording from Streets and Spaces, so you can read that yourself if you want to. But pardon? Okay, so Streets and Spaces is part of the Christchurch post-earthquake recovery plan for the central city, and it lays out how the city should be used in terms of transport and other things, and it gives recommendations on what each street should look like in terms of how it's used, the space that it's given to various forms of transport, and even down to paving and planting in some areas.
Recommendation.
It does quite clearly talk about changing to meet development patterns, changing development patterns. So it very much leaves the door open to different solutions in different places. But it's, I think, like we've heard from developers, if we step away from it, I think we should have a very clear idea of why we're stepping away from it and be able to explain that. Okay. Traffic and road conditions, it has about 6,000 vehicles a day, obviously peaks in morning and evening, slightly higher at weekdays. Mean speed isn't too high. It is important for access. So, I mean, you get into things like, well, if you want to create space and not widen the road corridor, then could you make it one way? I think it would be difficult to do so because of things like the access to car parks, the biomass boiler for the hospital, emergency access to the hospital, so on and so forth. Paracury public access isn't from Antigua. It's either from Morehouse or from St Asaph, but there is exit from it. I think they have service vehicles from Antigua, don't they? Yeah, Rich is nodding. So I think on big event days, they'll have exit from Paracury car park out onto Antigua, but generally it won't be a heavily used route. Public transport is not a scheduled bus route. Buses are known to be delayed turning right from St Asaph into Antigua. The chart in the bottom right, you can't really see most of it, but that shows delays at different points of the day, and that is between the bus stop on St Asaph and the one on, I think the one at the hospital, really. So it shows there's quite a significant delay at about 7 o'clock in the morning. That's a really busy bus route. High numbers a day, go 320 a day, significant passenger numbers. It's got quite a number of our core routes. It's got a lot of the express routes going through it. The road surface is along Antigua is quite old, 43 years, fairly poor condition. Barry was pointing out to me just before I came and sat down, because of the work we've done so far, it's been quite heavily studied. So the risks against things like coal tar are probably quite low, he says. But we have done quite a lot of work there over the years. The southern end is particularly poor, particularly around the intersection with Halkett. And the northern end is less bad, but still in a fairly poor condition. Cycling, it is identified as a key link between the city and the hospital. Between the Quarryman's Trail and the city. The cycle counter on Quarryman's Trail is only one way, so it only picks up cyclists going north. But it has a rolling 1 year average of over 500 cyclists, so equivalent to about 1,000 cycles a day, we think, along that bit of Antigua Street. The modelling that was done initially reckon that should about double over the next 20 years. So that's what we'd hope, is that would increase over time, although it is continuing to grow rapidly at the moment. There is a known issue at the northern end of it where cyclists go onto the wrong side of the road and then cross over St. Asaph on the right-hand side of the road. So they come up Antigua on the left, swing over to the wrong side of the road, and then cross over to get onto the shared path.
Yeah, they go across on that barn stance thing.
Yeah, but instead of wait, because if you're cycling north into town, if you sit and wait there, you have to wait for quite a long time for the phasing to let you go diagonally. Whereas if you go the wrong side of the road, which obviously I've never done, you only have to wait for the lights to be red on St. Asaph and you can go straight across and carry on into town. So so we know that people are doing that. It doesn't seem to drive many accidents, but it's a known safety issue in that area. The little graphic on the bottom right, you can't really see that, but the Streets and Spaces Guide, when I said before, it identifies modes and traffic plans in the central city. This bit of Antigua Street is specifically identified as a cycling route. So that's its primary function in the city. Safety, 27 crashes in the last 10 years, 3 serious, 8 minor. Mostly it's associated with the intersection at the northern end. And like I said, going through them, a lot of them feel like they're associated with red light running. And I think some of those problems have gone away through changes in the way that the intersection operates. Parking, I think, is quite interesting here. So this is identified in the Central City Parking Policy as an area of special purpose parking. So to quote it, it says use of space is to be managed on a case-by-case basis, having regard to all relevant considerations. So there is no demand here to supply parking or not supply parking or supply particular types of parking. It's very much open to how we think it should be used. The parking study was done in 2017, quite high utilisation, and a significant portion of that was over 7 hours. So, I mean, that's commuters and hospital workers, I would think. And that's what the consultation feedback told us at that time. The situation has changed. I mean, there's a parking building that's been built on Hagley Avenue. I mean, and it's just not been there. The parking's just not been there for, 5 years. So I think people have started using it in different ways. I think is a really interesting graphic. So the light blue areas are sort of parkmate type parking. They're public parking that you can use. Yellow is private parking. I've obviously included the Parakiori parking that isn't open yet, but will be. And then blue is Halkett Street, which has timed parking at the moment. Probably overstepping the mark a little bit, but I don't think that timed parking really solves a problem there. Every business there has its own parking, and long-term parking is available. So, I mean, that's for you to decide, but so we asked the design team to come up with a couple of specimen designs for this, and they came up with a couple of different options. So there's option one. So when I put the saving up there, I think that saving is incredibly conservative. We bound together these designs in about a week, probably. They're nodding at me about that long. And going through them, it doesn't take very long to say, oh, why don't we change this? Why don't we tweak that? So there's probably quite a lot more to come out of it as we develop it. But it's whether you're open to these or other things. But just to show you, there are significant savings by looking at these. So this retains parking on the western side. And it retains cycle separation. So probably cycle separation is quite important here, given it's given that it's a main cycle route. The other option retains the separated cycling, but removes all the parking. The advantage of that is that you stay within the existing road corridor. So it removes some of the issues with, or some of the risks against drainage, some of the issues with road build-ups, so on and so forth. So that there are other options, which is effectively what we're trying to say with this. And at that point, I'll hand over to you for a workshop, because really, if we're going to redesign it, we need to get a clear idea of what you're open to, what you're not open to, because we probably haven't got time to go through significant numbers of design options at this stage.
Are you pointing at someone? Tim.
Thank you. I don't see any point in redesigning it, but I just think there's a couple of things. We now in the area have 2 medical research organisations, and we also have the Pacific Medical Centre. So that's been a change. So it is actually important to have some parking in that area, because both those medical research places are really important for our economy, and it's expanding, and at a very high level, a high finance, if you like. And the second one is the intersection with St Asaph and Antigua. The barn dance, you've got it horizontal, and I can't remember what slide it is, but you've got it going from Pitakuri to the hospital parking, the elite parking area, if you like. I think it should just be both ways, because looking at it, people are they're not using it at the moment, because obviously the hospital's rebuilding their corner where they had their coal boiler. But it may as well be a barn dance, because it is at the Chewham, and it works really well right across. So I think you just make it a barn dance.
Yeah, I mean, it effectively works as barn dance anyway. I mean, it stops all the traffic for that phase.
Yeah, no, it's working.
There's a significant number of cyclists that go diagonally, and with the opening of Parakiuri, that'll probably become even more. So it may be that it's quite uncomfortable to go diagonally the other way. But yeah.
Well, it just depends what the hospital does, but I think we may as well make it a full barn dance, and it's just seems logical. But I just think that the design you've got, that's fine, but it is just, if anyone was kind of saying about taking the parking out, now that we've got the 2 medical research units and the Pacific Island Medical Centre, I think it's really important to retain some parking. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay, so we've got Victoria.
Thanks, Jacob. Can we go back to the streets and spaces picture that you've got?
Oh, that one.
Yeah, that one there. Can I just check on those key features where you've got the on-street parallel parking integrated with the street trees? Yeah, on both sides of the road. But when you look at the current approved design, there's one side of the road that actually doesn't have any parking at all. So is that correct?
Yep.
So the streets and spaces picture that you've got on the next one, the point I'm just trying to make is that there actually isn't any parking on the other side of the road. So that graphic that you've got there, side key features, there's no interspersed parking on one side of it. There's only trees.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a space issue. You run up against the boundary of Parakiuri.
No, I'm talking on the other side. So can I just check? Because on this picture, sorry to labour the point, can we go back to the other slide?
Yeah.
On there, you show that there's parking on both sides, which is interspersed with trees. And yet the current approved design has one side with no parking at all.
Yeah. Like I said, you're on the eastern side, you're governed by the back of the footpath. So you're not going to be able to change that. And on the western side, so at the bottom of the picture, you're governed by the amount of space you can get before you hit Parakiori.
Okay, so my
Effectively,
query
so
is
that's-
why are we showing that there is parking on both sides on that streets and spaces graphic? Or am I missing something?
The streets and spaces graphic is out of the streets and
Oh,
spaces
got it.
guide.
Yeah. I said, sorry.
Graphic out, which is indicative.
So that I literally copied and
Not
pasted.
showing what we're doing. Okay.
No.
thanks.
That's trying to show you what was set aside, what was.
Okay, I get it. Thank you. I was just trying to figure that piece out. So my next query is, I'm aware that the Crown has gifted or will be gifting the extra land on the side of Metro Sports now. Is that correct? Has that happened? Or is it in the process of?
No, process of.
Okay, so now that we've got that extra land there, have you considered a dual way cycle lane on that side of the footpath beside Metro Sports in exactly the same design as you have at the city end of Antigua, where you've got the dual and it's working, and the footpath beside it, and it's the same design that you'd then have down St Asaph Street? So have you considered that design as another option along this piece?
So bi-directional, so looking at that one, sorry, this is probably the best graph I've got to show. It shows the whole thing in one go. So bi-directional on the bottom of the picture, effectively, on the western side, is what you're asking. So if you're cycling, say, from town to head south, you would go on the eastern side, you would then cross diagonally, you go down that section of Antigua on the western side, and then at Morehouse, you would have to somehow cross back across because it's unidirectional on the southern side of Morehouse. And it becomes very complicated to cycle.
But you've got the crossing point already on the diagonal across at that St Asaph and Antigua Street. So you're anticipating that the cyclists are crossing there already.
But they cross, if they're heading north, they cross there. If you're heading south, you head straight down the eastern side of the road as it stands at the moment.
Have we got other areas in town where the cyclists are required to cross intersections? I mean, is this unique that if we travel on the west side of Antigua on a dual cycle lane along there, and I see that you've got a raised platform, is there any way that you could make some facility for cyclists to cross back over?
So the raised platform's unsignalised, so we'd have to put in extra funding in that for that signalised platform as well. So we did look at this early on in the scheming, and to the two-way options on both sides of the road. And it just, for us, cost was probably one of the main reasons why it wasn't continued. You still got your two lanes that are coming from both directions. Then when you get to Morehouse Ave, you still got to get them back across the other side of the road. And then you got a lot of people, you're still going to have those manoeuvres of cyclists that aren't going to be doing the safe manoeuvres because they're coming from one side, coming along, and then they're going to get it back across the other side.
Well, no, but we can't constantly be designing for the lowest common denominator with poor behaviour from cyclists. I mean, it's not unreasonable for cyclists to cross at an intersection on a light.
But I think we're missing the point, whereas in Antigua Street, when they come to St Asaph Street, basically that's the end of the street because they then go across and go to the boat sheds, whereas the other way to Morehouse Ave, there is a whole cycle lane, both sides of the, it's the totally different ends. One's the end or change of a journey, the other one is the start of a journey home.
Yeah, well, the issue for me was why can't we extend that same modelling along there and whether there'd be any cost implications, because one of the issues I've got is $4.5 million for one block. I'm really just struggling with this, and I wonder whether we've really looked at any other alternatives that aren't going to cost so much money. Yeah, I know. Well, I'm asking.
But they're not saving any money, really.
I'm asking for 3.
Okay, you done? Right. Melanie?
Right. I feel like every time I'm the chair of a hearings panel, it's never going to stick. But hey, firstly, where are those redesigns? Don't really have any trees in them, do they?
No.
So that's the first slide, the whatever you called it.
The streets and spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that's kind of the point, is that just stick with the streets and spaces design guide. We think there's virtually no real value, and I think you've got to step away from it if you want any real reductions. And so that's kind of why we're doing this workshop as a
Yeah, well, I'm pro the trees, and I think they were quite popular in that consultation. I'm not keen on a narrower footpath alongside Parakiori as well. I think a lot of people will be
narrower.
As one of them said, it'll go narrower.
Yes, because we're not making any use of the free. How many metres of Crown land we're getting? 4, 3?
2.4.
2.4
wide.
2.4. Yep. So we're not making any use of that. We're just filling up the plants. That's the bit on, but I haven't started yet. Kerry.
Well, I think that is a good use. Anyhow, I presume we have to go out to consultation to make alterations to this.
Yes, we would. Yeah.
Right. So then my next question is, how much is it to do the consultation, do the redesign, et cetera, versus the extra cost of the original project?
Yeah, I would think it's probably in the region of 200 to 300.
So we're saving ourselves $300,000 to $500,000.
Possibly. I think there's
to
probably
make it look less nice. And okay. And the other thing is with the number of cyclists you talked about, like doubling. Does it take into account like once the pool is open? Because I know that when that pool opens, we'll probably go to Pioneer less and bike into town, and people in South Christchurch bike. So I wonder if that'll even be more. I mean, I know we're keeping the cycleway, but the importance of that cycling route may possibly be even more than what you sort of mentioned.
Possibly. I mean, the modelling, the initial cycle modelling that was done took into account things like the anchor projects, of which this is one. So it should take that into account. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm with Tim. I wouldn't want to see any changes to this. I'd rather just spend the money because it's going to look really good. And keeping a bit of parking there is actually quite good.
Thanks.
Sarah, please.
Apart from the cost savings, are there any other reasons we would redesign? Like it's just purely because of the cost.
It's
right?
purely because of the cost.
So, given that delays equal cost as well, so Melanie was talking about the consultation costs, that kind of stuff. If it took us another year because of consultation and hearings panel and reports to council and stuff, we'd also see cost increase there. Yeah.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, there's a cost associated with doing additional design, yeah.
And would a change in design make it any more or less likely to get Waka Kotahi funding? Not really. It's hardly getting in any anyway. So, yeah,
it's difficult to say. I think we would probably need to demonstrate to them that we'd looked at every single option, and so we probably would have to go through or at least demonstrate that we looked at every possible design and ruled it out, and this could be part of that.
Yeah. And I think I agree with Tim and Melanie, where like I don't think that there's a good financial or environmental reason to relook at it. And I think that just getting on with it, linking up that part of the city to the city centre as soon as we can, I think it's really good. And the lack of trees, I think, is a real issue. Like we've got a tree policy now. We're aiming for street tree coverage of 25%. This was one of those opportunities. The central city streets are bereft of trees for the most part. And this, was going to be one of those first opportunities to do a decent section with trees. So I'm quite keen just to go with the approved design. It's a very brutal
The car park is full of trees.
And there's plenty. Look at all of that parking, and you can see now when you go down Morehouse Ave, the enormous amount of off-street parking there for Parakiori. I don't think a few parks is worth all of that extra time and delay.
So can I just point something out? So these are very deliberately designed to pull the road back within the existing road corridor as much as possible. And going back to your point about them giving us 2.4 metres of land, there is a possibility that we can use that to plant trees in land that would become ours that's behind the footpath. So there are options in terms of that. We haven't looked at that at the moment, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't include trees in that space.
However,
But that's only on that's on one side of the road and not both.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be better just to leave that land for now to see how it develops in the next 3 to 5 years? Because Parakiori, whether it's a great success and crowds and hordes of people go to it, and that land may be required for a wider footpath rather than trees or whatever. So in the current design, we've actually got the trees already designed. It seems to work. So
and that water runoff with the rain gardens.
Because if we suddenly go and plant trees, and then we realise that there's a traffic pedestrian issue, we're screwed.
Yeah,
so I
it's
think
the whole spending a huge amount of sort of resource to try and find sort of a $300,000, maybe $400,000 saving all up, when we didn't do redesign, for example, to save money on Te Kaha when it was 150 million over. Like, it's, you know, we didn't go, okay, it's 150 million over, what things can we cut back? Do we still want to do the flash spa for the rugby players? Yes, we do.
However, do remember that the Parakiori is free, and Te Kaha is there's $300 million discount. So, and Te Pai is free as well. So I think we've got to keep it relative.
Okay, right. Aaron?
Yeah. So I take it this piece of road isn't used for the fuel trucks that deliver the biomass to the hospital?
They are.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So do any of the designs prohibit those vehicles going down here, or make it so they're all fine? They've all said, we're good to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Then also, why did we not just make, and do this in lots of areas, make them more like when you go up through the Papanui parallel and you got the shared space roads, when the lower speed, you still got the parking. Why do we not do that with these spaces? Why do we seem to over-engineer them so much?
Those areas are urban greenways, and generally you don't use urban greenways unless you're under about 1,500 vehicles a day. And this has about 6,000 at the moment, and that'll probably increase when Parakiori opens.
Right. Okay. So that's pretty clear that why that doesn't work. Yeah. And so I'm in favour of keeping as many car parks as possible, because these are used by people at night time, especially for accessing the hospital. So every time we take out any car parks in this entire area, you're making the hospital less accessible, and especially for people of lower incomes. So if we want to hurt them, go ahead and take out as many as you can. But if you want to keep the hospital accessible, keep them there.
Okay.
There's at the moment there's parking on the eastern side, but not on the western side.
That's only because the pool's being built.
Yes, that's because the pool's been built. But I mean, that's been the case for 4 years.
Far too long.
that design that I'm looking at there, the one that saves the 0.6 million, that's got a whole row of car parks there in what I'm looking at, or is this not accurate?
Yeah, so that was the one where we tried to keep as much parking as we reasonably could. Yeah.
And at each end of that, can you not drop a tree in each end? Just drop the odd tree in here and there. No. Okay.
Right. Thank you, Aaron. Jake?
As local councillor, you'd expect me to want the full fat option, so I'm happy with status quo. But I think Tim actually made a really good point. When the government gets away with spending whatever their final bill on this one will be, $6 billion, $10 billion, who knows? Actually spending 3 or best part of 4 actually on a complete street redesign, it's actually pretty good value for money, really.
Sorry. Sarah wants another one. Tyrone.
Thank you. Just sort of. So I cycle that route every day of my life, twice a day, and obviously once you get past going northbound past Morehouse Avenue, it becomes very, very tricky. But it is the super highway of cycling in Christchurch, absolutely. Now, some cyclists, definitely not me, do swing across Antigua Street to, and it's probably the norm rather than the exception. So with the current approved design, so they won't be able to do that because because of the separation. So it's going to be very difficult to do the swing. With the alternatives, is that still possible? Like, I mean, are you less or more likely to be able to do the swing with the alternative design?
It's still separated, so it'd still be a physical separation.
Yeah, yeah. So regardless of the design,
yeah, I mean,
it's going to motivate, in theory, motivates cyclists to remain on that.
If there's
side.
separation there, I think you would probably discourage people from swinging out. Yeah.
And in every design presented, the crossing is going to be that angular one across St. Asaph Street.
So it kind of has to work like that. There's a cycleway that goes along St. Asaph that runs east to west, and it runs down to Hagley Park. And yeah, because it comes north unidirectionally up to Morehouse, yeah, it sort of has to work like that. There's bidirectional from St. Asaph north. It's one direction on St. Asaph going west. So yeah, it sort of lends itself to that diagonal, and that diagonal takes you from the central city straight into Parakiori. So it's sort of
right.
works.
Okay. And going southbound, it doesn't matter because obviously there's no crossover required. So it's just so none of those designs is any better or worse for a southbound cyclist in terms of, so it's just protected, separated cycleways. There's no difference, right?
Yeah. No, not in what we've proposed at the moment. I mean,
cool. Thank you.
Righto, Marcus.
Yeah, this is an interesting quandary. I mean, the idealistic Hedon says, yeah, let's stick with what we've got because it looks beautiful and wonderful. But of course, the budget can't be overlooked in the fact that, hey, we're responsible for the ratepayers' dollars. But in hearing the discussion around consultation being needed for one of the new options or either of the new options, that kind of negates the savings to a large degree, doesn't it?
I mean, it depends how big the savings turn out to be. That's the crux of it, really.
So I mean, I'm in two minds myself and wonder whether just sticking with what we've got and biting the bullet and carrying on is wise. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Okay, right. My wee turn. We've got Victoria, Tim, and Sarah. Okay, and Yanni. Sorry. Right. What we've got here. It was spending $4.5 million on something that is going to remove every car park, more or less, if we stick with what we've got. We're going to put a whole lot of trees, rain gardens in the road, which no other road in Christchurch has got rain gardens in, apart from Waterloo Business Park, because I put them in. There's a couple, bugger all. This is it. Are we going to continue to put rain gardens in every road going forward? But that's a different thing. We're not taking into advantage any of the 2.4 metres that we're going to get given by the Crown. Can you put it back to the option one, please? Yep. If we came down here from the boat sheds, came across on the barn stance and went all the way along to Morehouse Ave on that side with a double way one, like we've got where we've got shared path with cyclists and pedestrians, and all the way down St. Asaph Street to Hagley Park, we could have leave the eastern side of the road totally alone and leave the car parks there that are already there. Have the western side with all the car parks that are already there. The only issue is getting across, which I thoroughly agree, getting across from the double cycleway at the Morehouse Ave end to link up with the one-way bit that carries on south. Somewhere along the line, we should be able to do that. Cyclists aren't daft; they're not silly. I reckon easily we could save $2 million doing it like this, easily. So that's what I'd like someone to look at, please. Anyway, we have got Victoria's question.
Can I just get some clarification on the consultation issue? I sort of lost the thread of the conversation. Do we or do we not have to consult if we redesign this? I'm just...
Yes.
So going back to Sarah's point, we didn't have to consult on some other issues. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it was a whole 9 yards, this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And poor old Mel
that
was
that is confirmed. There is a legal requirement for us to reconsult if we go back and design it.
Yes, and depending on how much we redesign it, depends on the level of consultation we need to
Okay.
do. But yes, I think it's fair to say we need to
That's the
reconsult.
bit I was missing. Okay. Can you go back to the current design? Can you tell me where will the school buses park? Often we have lots of schools going to our swimming facilities, and when we have tournaments and things on and we have lots of people coming and arriving on buses, where is it anticipated that the buses will park and offload?
Within their car park. So
Okay, so it has to be in the car park.
Yeah.
So there's no intent, they don't need that along the Antigua Street.
no.
Okay, thanks for that.
So going back to my point at the beginning, I think when they have big event days, the plan is that they will open up. I don't know if this will work on here. No. On the lower of the two pictures, where it says Antigua Street, just on the left-hand side of that, there's an exit out from there, which is what they will use in big events.
Oh, okay, so not all the time, only for big events.
No, yeah. For the rest of the time, they'll just use the access from Morehouse and St.
Okay, thanks for that. Can I just go back then to the coal tar issue?
Yeah.
And I know we dismissed it really lightly, and you said we'll just cross our fingers. Given the conversation that we've just had, I mean, this is a real issue. You said that you've done a lot of prior work in this area. Is there any information available?
Oh yeah, there's huge amounts of information. Like I said, we've done an enormous amount of testing on this road to get to the point where we are with this design, and that's why we know.
So it wasn't
we
just
have a level of confidence.
It wasn't
in
just
the
a flippant. Let's cross our fingers.
No,
You've
sorry. It was in relation to the
informed
fact that
by-
we've just had a very long session on coal tar.
Yeah,
sorry.
And that comment then has been informed by the data that you've already got available.
Yes. Yeah. So there's been extensive potholing along this road.
Yeah, got it.
all sorts of
Okay,
things, yeah.
so can I just go back to the cost of inflation then on one of your slides? Let me see where that is.
That one.
Talk about inflation. Which one is that on?
It's just before the current proof design.
Okay, there we are. Got it. So one of the comments has been made that if we do delay this and go back to redesign it and have to go back up to consultation, that it could push the cost up further. I'm just unsure how that really fits in with the comment that we've made there on the bottom of the inflation. I just can't reconcile it.
It's me trying to manage. There's a lot of uncertainty around this. So we have seen quite a lot of increases in tenders over the past 2 or 3 years.
We're starting to see
at
them
the
come
moment,
down a bit.
I was going to say at the moment, contractors are fighting hard, and we are seeing tenders come in under their estimate.
Yeah. And with inflation coming down, so we could reasonably assume that just a further delay doesn't mean that the cost will increase.
Not necessarily, no.
Yeah, that's all the point. Thanks.
Okay, right. Now, what we've got to do, I know we've got a couple more questions. We have more questions. But what we've got to really do is give these guys a steer on, do they go back and redesign option 1, option 2, or Phil's option 3, and to give them a steer on what to do, because we're getting into a workshop and debate here before we know where we are, and we're getting nowhere fast. Okay, so I'm just letting people know where we're at. We've got Tim.
Right, so
then Sarah.
So between the design that went to the hearings panel and what there is now, so there's 24 parks between Churham Street and Morehouse Ave now. We lose 8. There are, I know the numbers. So there's going to be 16 on the approved plan. So with Ngaitahu's car park building, which is bigger than the car park building that was there prior to the earthquake, do we know? Because it seems that some people are concerned about hospital parking, which has always been a concern. But now we have this beautiful new, or Ngaitahu have a beautiful new parking building. Do we know the numbers of parks that are available in that building for people to get to the hospital?
Not off the top of my head.
So
but
it might pay then to find that out and throw that round to the councillors so that argument can be kind of taken out a wee bit.
Well, we'll take it out, Tim, as long as those car parks are free. So if we can find out all the free overnight car parks in that privately owned building, we'll be good. Pass that number around. Thanks. And I'll pass it on.
Well, it's just car parks, that's all. Because if you look at it, there are very few free car parks in the area.
No, low-income people will walk blocks and blocks because they have no money for overnight car parking.
Okay, we're getting
Okay,
right into it here.
Donald from Cashmere.
Yeah, hey, thanks for that, mate. I went to school in Woolston as well, mate.
Sarah.
Kia ora. Couple of things. Firstly, the opening of Parakiore, and while that's been delayed somewhat, what impacts would it have if we were in the midst of doing roadworks and stuff here when it opened?
Oh, it would be minimal. We're at the back of Parakiore, so the opening will be on the other side, and we could definitely stage it with the contractors to work that and make areas available.
No, I mean just generally like with the operations, not on the actual day of the opening.
I don't believe they access it through
Okay.
Santegua.
No.
But it had always been planned, like I said, to tie that in.
Wouldn't
So
it?
Richard and now Anne will manage that
Thinking about people
interface anyway.
accessing it and those kind of things.
Yeah.
Okay. And going back to Victoria's point on the potential for tenders to come in lower, and you've also mentioned on one of the slides that may be possible to reduce overrun without major changes. So what are your chances of, if we were to go out for tender now, the approved design, maybe the tender coming back lower and other minor changes, meaning the cost overruns actually didn't mean that we needed to redo the whole thing? So, yeah.
You're putting words in his mouth.
I mean, the position we're in is that under council's procurement rules, we can't go out and tender something when we know we don't have enough money to deliver it. It's not fair on contractors to put them in a position where they're tendering for stuff that we don't believe we could ever build.
Yeah, it's not.
So we kind of have to be in a position where we have the budget available, or at least earmarked, before we went out to tender.
Yeah. So we've got a certain amount of budget that's there. In a month's time or 6 weeks or so, we're going to be relooking at the whole transport program and rejigging. And at that point, we could be making sure the budget's there. But also sometimes we go out for tenders and they're higher than we expect and higher than we'd budgeted for.
We do, but we haven't gone out knowing that they're. I mean, that's the point. Is that we would need to have a reasonably good guess.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. We've got to tell you whether you want to redesign it or not. That's what it comes down to. So, really moving along. We've already cancelled the next briefing because we're running out of time. We've got one other little one. Yanni, and then Jake, and then that will do. Okay.
Oh yeah. So. Oh yeah, so you want the feedback. So the feedback that I would have is that on the eastern side you do a bi-directional. So that's consistent with the other. If you look at from Morehouse Ave to the river, we've got generally for the other two sections, you've actually got a bi-directional one anyway. So connecting that up, having the crossing, I think before the Morehouse intersection would work fine. So
yeah,
no, not on the railway. No, it's not, because if you need to get across, right? So when you're coming towards town,
so putting a bi-directional on the eastern side where you've got a lot more vehicle crossings,
I
you're going to have a lot more conflict.
So
we've got to do something different. Is what I'm hearing.
The other thing is the Park Terrace option. So I think we should do the Park Terrace option. I can't. Like if you look at Google Earth, the road condition actually looks fine. So I can't comprehend where all the money's going either. So yeah, for sure. But I can show you plenty of other roads that are really munted in the east that we don't have budget to fix apparently. So I just, and I look at the curb and channel that we're doing on places like Pages Road, and it doesn't seem that expensive when we're just moving curb and channel. So I'm really concerned about the cost of this. I can't quite comprehend why it's costing so much. And I'd much prefer a lower cost.
Yeah, thank you, mate.
Right?
Thank you. Who do we have? We had Jake.
Are you able to let me know how many free government paid for car parks are going in when the facility actually opens? How many hundreds of additional parks will be added? I think it's about 500. 550 additional car parks in the area that are free. Okay, available.
Parakiore is not free. Parakiore is not free car parking.
Okay, well, I think you've heard the table. I mean, there are a couple of dissenting views, but I think that it's actually been pretty decisive and pretty clear what people want to do. So
Okay, Victoria, last one.
So this is more of a suggestion rather than a query on the tail end of what Sarah said around all our other transport projects. Is a way forward for us for this is actually to leave this on the table or to just delay this and look at this in the round when we look at all of our transport projects in September, because we've got the same issues around prioritisation and use of budget. Is that that would be my suggestion, that we wait and that we actually consider this when we look at all our priorities in the budget and we have to cut our cloth.
I'm hearing 2 for redesign and about 10 for proceed as usual. So I think.
Okay, just one, the last one, right? How much is on budget? 3.5?
Redesign.
Oh, sorry, off the top of my head, I can't remember. It was in one of the early slides.
Roughly 3.6, something like that.
3.6, about 3.6, yeah.
So it's 4.5, so we're 900 short, and none of the 3.6 is subsidised. So the whole lot is coming from us. So did we, when we did it, went out for consultation, did we say that we were going to get probably 50% from NZTA or not? So all I'm doing is saying, how much do we, the ratepayers, have to pay? That's all. So thank you very much. I would like you to go away and redesign something, but the mood of the table is to do it the way it is. But I am convinced there are
That's not
millions
the
of
mood of
dollars.
the table. It's partial mood of the table, and as usual, Jake's poor judgment is well off. I heard it was 4 people.
If only you couldn't get more of your mates to turn up to the job, Aaron.
Mayor Phil, can we not hear from Lynette on whether there is any merit in this coming back in September?
Yep. Lynette. Yeah,
agreed.
I mean, it can be done, and we can do that, can't we? It's about 6 to 8 weeks delay. What does that impact with you, Jacob?
My concern would be that we'd still be building it when Parakiori opens, and that would be my concern, is that if we don't make it, well, if we don't start the design, we don't have to have got that far through the process, but the more we delay it, the more we're going to be up against Parakiori opening.
Yeah, but let's have a look at the date of Parakiori opening. I mean, that is a movable feast. And there is no guarantee that this is going to be opening in November. And if you look at the history, it'll be well beyond that anyway.
And if we're redesigning, if we get to sort of 6 to 8 weeks and then decide to redesign, yes, that's a delay. But if we in 6 to 8 weeks just find the budget and go with the current design, that's actually still likely to get us in time for Parakiori opening, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's the key thing.
Yeah.
I think go ahead with this, rejig the transport budget a little bit. Yeah.
But one thing we mustn't lose sight of, because I walked down there the other day, the Cuban channel on the Parakiori side of the road is absolutely stuck from everyone driving in and out. It needs to be replaced. So we should replace it as close to our new boundary of land that we can get, and utilise as much of the free land that we're getting. But that's just my opinion.
I mean, there's probably a reasonable argument, I think you alluded to it, that you do minimal works just to make it look reasonably nice, and then you do a temporary solution and see what it looks like in 2 or 3 years. And that's probably not an unreasonable approach, but obviously I'm not.
Yeah, great.
It's not for me to decide.
Cheers. My favourite. Okay, thank you very much. Right.
Now we're going into PX. So you gotta...
And we are now going into PX because we've got to have a wee update on something. So everyone who doesn't need to be here, please not be here. No.
Ran out of...
How's your wee girl, mate?
Yeah, good.